are back. You're listening to You Would Think, the Philadelphia Flyers podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Collington, and joining me today, he's back. The one, the only, Mr. Kevin Durso. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing well. Better than I was a couple weeks back.
Well, listen, we're back. It's been several weeks since, the gang's been back together, and since our last show, quite a lot has happened, but we're just going to kick it right off and jump straight into, we crowned a champion. The Tampa Bay Lightning took care of business and back-to-back. Kevin, is this team better than the back-to-back Penguins team?
Yes.
Okay.
I didn't even need to think about that.
Definitively.
Oh, you just started me off. Thank you for welcoming me back after like 6 weeks with a softball. Absolute lob right down the middle. I did just talk about this with Broads on an Open Ice Hits earlier this week, and we did kind of run over. We basically flat out determined we don't know if they're Detroit Red Wings level just yet among back-to-backs, because we haven't seen a lot of back. Like, it was funny. I actually saw a clip. I forget which show it was. It's one of these shows that's on. I'll pick one of the networks.
Sure.
It's one of these shows, though, these national radio shows that probably doesn't talk about hockey all that often, that tried to sit there and say at one point in time, back-to-backs happen a lot in hockey. I know. Here's the truth. Yes, over the course of history, it has happened a lot.
They've had dominant teams.
You've had dominant teams. You've had flat-out dynasties. You think about how, even down to the Edmonton Oilers did it
the late 80s
twice,
Oilers, right?
But did it twice, and we more or less associate that with, it's 4 and 5. We don't even go to twice. It's 2 sets of back-to-backs,
right?
We don't do that. The
Crazy.
Islanders won 4 in a row. The Canadians won 4 in a row. The Flyers won 2 in a row. The Bruins were winning back in the early 70s, and they won 2 and 3, I think, and something like that.
And even if you look at the early 2010s, the Kings and Blackhawks, back and forth for a couple of years. Blackhawks got 3 and 5 years. Kings got 2 and 4 years.
But it wasn't
no back-to-backs there.
Right. So that's why I even tried to say on the last Open Ice Hits, I'm like, the only back-to-backs, and I even said it's a little blurred in saying this because I say in my lifetime, and technically there was one that started before my lifetime that finished during
the other Penguins.
The other Penguins team. But okay,
that Yager, right. Mario, and everybody else.
But I'm sitting here going, that was 30 years ago.
Yep.
So then from that point on in the last 30 years, the only back-to-backs I can find are the 97-98 Red Wings, the Penguins of 5 years ago, 4 years ago, and this Tampa Bay team. Everybody else has had a gap between them. Have we seen some really incredible teams? Absolutely, because Detroit kept it going into the early 2000s, won again after the lockout in 2008, and then who else are we looking at here? The Chicago teams. The Chicago with 3 and 6, LA with 2 and 4. There's regularity there. But this, to me, and I even said, this is the best team post-lockout era. This is probably the best collective team, and the fact that they were able to, as I've mentioned before, run it back. So not so easily, because it wasn't easy, but they ran it back. I mean, it's the same group. There was nobody really. I mean, newcomer was David Savard. That's about all I got. David Savard and game-winning goal scorer Ross Colton, who wasn't on the team last year because he was still in development.
You know what? I'd have to do a bit of a deeper dive, but I'm kind of thinking about the comparisons, and they kind of just seem like a cranked-up version of the early 2010s Blackhawks. Right, you look at Jonathan Taves, and instead you have Braden Point filling that role spectacularly. Patrick Kane on the wing, there's your Nikita Kucherov. Victor Hedman, Duncan Keith. Man, the Blackhawks probably had a better defense overall.
But they never had a goalie like Andrei Vasilevsky.
Man, I don't know. Corey Crawford was special for a couple of years there. You forget that.
He was, but okay, so again, here's the funny thing about the comparison as well. Same kind of situation because there was a shortened year in there, so it was a weird situation. The playoffs were the playoffs were the typical grind, but getting there was not the same as it typically is. It was even shorter than this year, to be honest. So this year I think this year's more impressive because they didn't play as many games in 13 to get to the playoffs. This year, you not only were you playing a handful more,
it was the same number of months. It was just more compressed.
It was the same time frame, so you were playing an insanely condensed schedule. So all of that makes tons of sense.
There's definitely a comparison. There's a 30 for 30 here somewhere.
Yeah, is the 30 for 30 just as I mentioned this on Open Ice Hits too, because I even said the best thing I saw after all of this was in terms of media coverage was Greg Wyshynski's article about don't hate, basically as I put it, the words I used to describe it is don't hate the player, hate the game, in terms of if you're really that upset, like his line was perfect. If you're upset about, like, you're upset that the Tampa Bay Lightning just did this with the cap because your team wasn't smart enough to do it.
Right. Well, and that's the thing is, like, people asked me after the final, like, do you think they should have been allowed to do this? And the answer to that to me is definitively no. And then people ask, well, are you upset that they did? And the answer to that is also definitively no. Because, listen, I'm an old school wrestling fan, and there's an old school adage: if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. And nobody's trying harder than the Tampa Bay Lightning. Come on now.
But here's in fairness, it's not cheating if it's in the CBA that way. So you're not cheating. It's not that. Like that's the thing I think that's bugging a lot of us.
Listen, when the NHL says hard cap, and you're circumventing that through Nikita Kucherov having surgery and skating for 10 weeks before the playoffs start, we're a little talking about cheating.
But I can't go there.
You're telling me he didn't get cleared for 10 weeks, really? And then he came back and he looked as good as he did?
I wouldn't say 10 weeks.
It was pretty close, man. He was skating in like March.
But that's also when you deny a guy, like not deny a guy, but when he's not training at that point, like if that's when he started, I mean, I'll give you 6 easy because that's about what a training camp is, like from training camp and the month before. Like if you had 2 weeks of a training camp and a month before to actually start preparing yourself for conditioning again, I'm not going to sit there and tell you that he wasn't ready to go from day one when the playoffs started. I get that, but
you're telling me he couldn't have played a month beforehand.
Define cleared. That's the thing. Define cleared. I mean,
I know we might talk about Nolan Patrick later.
Right, like that, like exactly. You can't sit there and say that this final, like after a team decided he's got migraines, we can't let him play, even though he's skating, even though we have all this stuff, and then just then sit there and go, nope, now he's shut down, done.
Right?
Really? And he's still skating. Like you're not going to play him for like. It happens not all the time, but it's like the only reason it's talked about is because of who it is and how successful his career has been and how good of a player he is, that you essentially kept him in your back pocket until the most important time of the year rolled around. But there's no there's no rhyme or reason to a guy coming back in that situation and completely being his normal self. I mean, let's put it this way: Steven Stamkos barely played when the bubble rolled around. He comes back, he plays for 5 minutes, happens to score a goal. It's storybook, and then he can't play again for the rest of the playoffs after that. So we don't look at that any differently, because they tried, and then all of a sudden it's, well, he's hurt again, and now he can't play again, and nobody doubted anything with that.
But
he's hurt. He's hurt.
Here's the thing with it, though. To utilize LTIR cap space, you have to be fairly certain that player is not going to return, so you can utilize that space effectively, correct?
Well, sure, I got it.
Because if he comes back, his whole salary hits your cap, and all of a sudden you're $10 million over the cap. So they knew when they made their trade deadline acquisitions that he wasn't returning for the regular season. And it's hard for me to believe that they knew definitively he wasn't going to be clear that far in advance. You know what I mean?
I guess I don't get into an argument about this because of the fact that, like, no, the rules are the rules. That's the thing. The rules are the rules, and then if you don't like the way that it looks, if you don't like the aesthetics of, oh, he probably was cleared 3 weeks before the season was over, so he could have played then that's something for the owners and the Players Association to take up next time they negotiate a CBA.
Right, and I certainly don't begrudge the Tampa Bay Lightning for doing whatever they had to do to win and taking the advantages that they had to take. My theory is that loophole should not exist, and it's funny because as has kind of been going around, there was an owner meeting where this was essentially discussed. Tampa Bay wrote a proposal to the league after Patrick Kane and those 2015 Blackhawks did it. It's funny that we were talking about that team a second ago. It basically wrote a proposal to the league saying, hey, They went over the salary cap. They took advantage of the rules. Here's how we can close that, and no other team backed them on it. So the irony that just a few short years later, people are very upset about Tampa using that rule.
Well,
it's just very funny to me.
Well, yeah, you know why it's funny? Because the funny part is that you didn't agree with this then, so now we're going to utilize it. Like, it turns into that, you know? It's still in there. They literally just had meetings. They restructured this thing a year ago. Right. They all signed off on it. This isn't going to get discussed for a while, probably, because of the fact that you just had all these meetings. There was your time. That's your time to talk about it. Like,
you just signed a brand new CBA.
Right. So, and I don't think, like, it's not that I think there's anything wrong with, like, they knew out of last year that he was hurt. That's the thing. Like, I don't know if there's anybody right now that I find out from this championship team that I go, well, now we know a guy is significantly injured. He's going to have this. He's going to have that. You know, and that means that he's going to be out going into next year. Like, there's actually, like, you know what else probably contributed? It contributed and it didn't, okay? Because in fairness, like, the reason it also doesn't look good is because you're going from the end of September and they didn't start a season until mid-January. So you had October, November, December completely and half of January. So 3.5 months before you were really back into the games of it for a guy to heal up a little bit. And then you're trying to say on top of it that it took 4 full months before you could even say he was able to play.
Right.
So this injury was a 7-month it's kind of a 7-8 month injury, and it very well could be the case. I mean, it wasn't anything simple, you know. It was,
right? Certainly.
Right, like that.
It's just mighty convenient.
It was, but it was convenient because of who it was. Like it could have been anybody. You know,
right.
It could have been Pat Maroon, and Pat Maroon does not make $8 million or whatever it was, and then you're not saving that. And granted,
you're not going out and getting Blake Coleman and, you know, Barkley Goudreau and all the pieces that they added.
Well, see, no, not necessarily though, because they did add those pieces based off of having a full roster. If nothing else, they added those guys because Stamkos was hurt, and that was legit because he played for 5 minutes in the playoffs.
Right.
After having 3 months off to begin with, like. That was legit.
That was crazy.
So they added those guys, and look, we'll see how this evens out. They've got those two, specifically those two guys you just mentioned, who are free agents. I think Tyler Johnson's gone. I think he's going to Seattle.
I think they're gonna make him go to Seattle. Yeah,
like I think that's destined to happen. And if that's the case, so be it. But that will free up some of the cap space again. That will, you know, and I don't look. I think they want to get rid of Blake Coleman or Barkley Goudreau. No, I don't.
I think they're going to do whatever they can to keep Barkley Goudreau.
I would say they do whatever they can to keep Blake Coleman because I think Blake Coleman has been that like.
It's Tampa. They're going to sign both of them for $1 million a piece because that's how Tampa works.
They very well could. I mean, here, look, I don't. Tyler Johnson, I think, is gone. I don't think they're keeping David Savard.
No, I agree.
And then here's the only thing, because you're right. Look, it's funny. I think that as much as I think that Tyler Johnson is the guy who's going to go to Seattle, it's funny because I did see a tweet earlier today, actually, because they're going to have to leave unprotected some kind of important people.
Yep.
And two names in particular that I did see were, I believe, were Alex Killorn and Eric Chernak.
Yep.
And
both those pieces, both guys who were huge in the cup run.
Right, because at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, if you're protecting, which defenseman are you protecting if you're Tampa Bay? Hedman's an obvious. Yep. I would say Sergachev is also an obvious.
Yep.
And then you have to make a choice. And right now, given everything, you might be protecting Ryan McDonough because of how good he was in these playoffs. I know he's older, but it might be him. You know, I don't I don't think it's Jan Ruda. I don't think
you're that upset if Seattle takes him though. He was really good, but so was Eric Chernak. And Eric Chernak's just younger. A lot of them.
The whole team was good.
Oh yeah, I mean it's a dynasty team. It's a juggernaut team.
Right. So you don't there's no right answer here. You know what I mean?
Is anybody surprised if they sign like all the old dudes that the Leafs just signed this year and go win a cup with like Joe Thornton and Jason Spezza as their bottom line? Like I know they're not going to because Jason Spezza is never going to play anywhere else again. But you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, and Wayne Simmons already re-signed with Toronto as well, so that's another whole thing. But I think that's I'm riding off into the sunset with my hometown team.
That's fair.
You know, I'm just gonna 2 more years and I think I'm good. Like. because what Wayne Simmons is what? He's gonna be 35 next year, I guess, or something like that.
He's not on the young end of things, especially with the style
maybe
he
he's
played.
slightly younger than that. He's got to be younger than that because he's younger than Giroux.
Yeah, he might only be 31.
Giroux's going on 34. I think he's 33 then. I think he's 1 year younger. But beside the point. Anyway, but okay, so then he'll be like pushing 35 when it's over.
A lot of hard miles.
Right. That's the point. He'll be pushing 35 when that contract's up, and considering everything he's had to battle through, the type of player he was.
The injuries.
But now we're getting off track because that's not about Tampa Bay Lightning.
No.
So I think David Savard is gone more than likely because I don't think they'll be able to afford him. And then you've got to factor in, like I said, these other guys. And then
I think David Savard was the old guy gets his cup signing, and it did what it was.
He's not that old though, is he?
Isn't he? I thought he was
like 29.
Oh, maybe I'm wrong. It just feels like he's been around for 11 years.
That's because so many of these kids are coming in at
20 years old.
Not even at 18. So when they're 28 years old, you go, this guy has 10 years of playing time.
Right. Like the fact that Sean Couturier will be starting his 9th season this year.
It's more than that. I think he's been.
It might be 10.
I think he's into his 10th already. Who was I talking about? David Savard is 30 on the dot.
Oh, is he? Okay, I thought he was older than that.
He's not. That's what I'm saying. He's not that old. He's just.
No, you're right.
But he's when you look at his career and go, yes, he's been playing since the 2011-12 season. He's got 10 years under his belt. He's 30, so he started playing at 20. You know. All right. So anyway, let me go to the forwards because I was trying to think about the forwards that you would protect if you're Tampa as well. Now, there's 3 clear-cut obvious right.
All right, you got Stamkos, Point, and Kucherov there.
They're obvious. I think Palat is safe. That's 4.
How many no-trade clauses do they have?
It's a good question. I don't know off the top of my head, but most of these guys, I'd be willing to guess most of these guys don't because you can't give out that many anyway.
Right.
I think there's a number on that anyway, but beside the point. So I would say that Palat is one of them. I would say that Cirelli is one of them. That would be 6, or that would be 5.
So I just pulled up their cap friendly. Things are very interesting. First of all, Ryan McDonough has a no trade clause, so he'll be protected.
That's why he's protected. There you go. See, I told you he was going to be protected.
Nikita Kucherov, no move clause. Steven Stamkos, no move clause. Andre Palat.
Not moving them anyway.
Andre Palat, no move clause. Yanni Gourde, no move clause.
Really? I didn't know Yanni Gourde had one. Okay, but I was thinking he might be one.
Tyler Johnson, no move clause, but whatever. He's probably going to. I think he has already waived that. If not, I'm sure he will.
All right, hold on a minute, because it's worth noting. Okay, so here we go. This is important then, because 3 of them are full. So you are Yanni Gourde has a full, Stamkos has a full, Kucherov has a full among forwards anyway, and McDonough is I'm sorry, no, they both are. Okay, hold on a minute. McDonough could go to Seattle.
Oh, because it's a no trade.
It's a no trade, not a no move. So he is able to be exposed, but I don't. Is
that how that works? I thought that was no trade protected too.
It might be. I don't know for certain.
I thought I remember hearing that from the Vegas draft. I think there was a flyer who had a no trade but not a no move, and I think it was relevant, but I'm not sure who.
Anyway, and Hedman obviously has one. That makes sense. And Vasilevsky's a goalie you're protecting. It doesn't really.
That one doesn't matter.
That doesn't factor in. But so Hedman. So let's assume Hedman, McDonough, and probably Sergachev are the 2 or the 3 defensemen that you would probably protect. Then you have to protect Kucherov, Stamkos, Gourde. You're going to protect Point, who doesn't have any movement clauses or anything like that in his contract.
I'm sure he will on his next contract.
I don't think it really makes a freaking difference.
He's on a bridge deal.
Right. Yeah. Palat you're going to protect anyway because you had to like what you got. So that's fair. All right, so then we
have to assume Johnson's waiving. Right? Because they've just been talking about moving him for so long.
It's modified. So I wouldn't be, like same with Killorn, same with Maroon. Like these are modified deals. I don't know.
Player submits a 20-team trade list for Tyler Johnson.
Right. No. Hold on.
For Alex Killorn, it's a 16-team no-trade list.
Oh, yeah. Okay, there you go.
And then for Patrick Maroon, it's a 16-team trade list.
Which is whatever. I mean, it doesn't really make a difference. I'm just saying, like, there's a way. Well, and again, Sorelli's another one who doesn't have a no move clause that you're going to protect because you like him that much. You have to.
Yeah, but you're losing something good. You're losing Matthew
well,
Joseph. You're losing Mitchell Stevens. You're losing Eric Chernak. You're losing somebody good here.
Right. Not to mention, and again, not to mention. See, that's the funny part too, because if it's Chernak, think about if it's Chernak for a second. And I'm not trying to speculate too much because I wouldn't know who they're going to take. And for all I know, like I said, I think that there's going to be a deal in the works that they get Tyler Johnson to sign off on it, and then this way that contract of $5 million a year goes somewhere.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Seattle
that's what I'm saying. Like,
solves all their problems
like,
for them.
Imagine if it is Chernak who makes $2.95 million per year. That solves nothing for them.
Nope.
It solves nothing. Like now you're.
That would be a great move by Seattle.
It's great.
It leaves Tampa high and dry.
Now, in fairness, that's the type of player you might be able to entice to take on a full contract. Like for somebody else, like I think somebody would look at at the way he plays, look at $2.9 million for the next 2 years, and say that sounds pretty good. We'll take that.
If I'm Seattle, I'm looking at Tampa, and I'm going. I see that Eric Johnson, and I would also like Eric Chernak, please. And kind of pull a Florida Johnson Panthers. If they take Tyler Johnson and also get Eric Chernak in a trade to take the deal.
I can't see Tampa signing off on that though. Like I think Tampa's going to give what Tampa's going to give you is
Tampa's up the creek.
Tampa will. Well, they don't have one this year. That's part of the problem. So they would have to give away next year's, I guess. Like,
you think they're just selling picks?
They could. I mean, here's the thing about it. What do you? I don't want to say what do you need them for. You built your entire team on draft picks, basically. But,
your team is built to be good for the next 5 years. You don't need to worry about draft picks right now. But not only that,
but like so let's say like if you lose Tyler Johnson,
your all-world goalie is 26 years old. Like your window is wide open.
Well, not only that, but where I'm getting at is that if you lose Tyler Johnson, then who fills the void eventually? Could be Matthew Joseph. Could be Ross Colton. These guys are young; they barely played.
Could be anybody. Wasn't Tyler Johnson bottom not getting a ton of minutes for them? Didn't he spend some time in the AHL last year?
I don't know if he actually went to the AHL specifically last year. He was on waivers.
He was sent down, I believe.
He was on waivers and didn't get claimed. I don't know if they ever sent him down because when you clear waivers, you can then kind of be back and forth, and you're not. Right. Like, it's easy to move the contract at that point if you need to.
Right. We saw it with Shane Gostisbehere this year.
Right. But it doesn't mean that you have to stop playing the guy. So, I don't know.
Well, either way, I do want to congratulate the Tampa Bay Lightning, and regardless of the whatever controversy you want to call their win.
I'm not gonna congratulate them because I already did on Open Ice Hits. No,
that's fair.
They're worthy of a lot of congratulations. Look, I've said this before about them. They've got the best goalie in the world. I think they've got the best defenseman in the world. They've got 3 of the best forwards we've ever seen, and yet they all almost completely collectively did not do anything when it came to goal scoring in the last 2 games of this series. You got goals from Barclay Gaudreau and Pat Maroon and Ross Colton, who are guys who you probably would not have thought of at the beginning of this thing. And Braden Point didn't score a goal in this Stanley Cup final after having 14 in 3 rounds. And Andrei Vasilevsky has posted shutouts in every clincher of this season, of this postseason, and the Stanley Cup final last year. So that's 5 in a row, 4 this year, 3 after a loss, 2 with 1-0 shutouts in the last 2 games. He's outstanding.
He's spectacular.
Do we need to say any more about them? Like,
no. Congratulations. That's all we need to say.
Because the reason we don't is that's as much as as people may not like the way they got around the cap per se. Right. This is the model organization right here.
The Tampa Bay Lightning are the team that everyone builds in NHL 21.
Did you see
when you go into franchise mode and you make all sorts of really good trades and make your team really, really good, you end up with the Tampa Bay Lightning.
I've talked to you about Twitter before because I know you're not on there personally. The podcast has an account, so you kind of browse through that, I suppose. Now, Down Goes Brown had a great tweet, and I mentioned it on Open Ice Hits too. The Tampa Bay Lightning this year are the team that you want your team to be when it grows up.
Yeah.
That was 100%. That was so great to say because it's exactly right. Like, because it was, and the tweet was perfect because the tweet made a nod to the Canadians making the finals is a good thing for the game because basically it gives all 32 teams this sense of hope. I
wanted to talk about the Canadians next. Right. Yeah, for sure.
It's possible, but the Lightning are the team you want your team to be when it grows up, and I think that that's a perfect summation of it because that's how. Like I remember I talked about this with Broads on Open Ice Hits this past episode, and I even said, I had this thought as Thursday kind of went along, as we were, because when you get to Thursday, at like the day after the Cup final is over, you have these, like, especially since I was preparing for an all NHL show like I do, you're starting to have these reflections of, well, what do you take away from this? Like, what kind of points can you make about the team as a whole, all that type of stuff? And I sat there thinking about it, and I went, who was their free agent? Like when we sit there and we go, like, every team down the road will probably be able to say, like for example, if the Toronto Maple Leafs would have won the Stanley Cup, then eventually down the line we would have gone, well, when it was time to go for it, they went out and got John Tavares on top of the guys that they drafted, on top of the Matthews and the Marners and all that type of stuff, right? Like, your guy was John Tavares. You went out and you got you made the splash of the offseason with that, right? So I go back, so I look at Tampa though, and I go, who's the guy? And I finally figured it out probably halfway through
Pat
recording
Maroon?
the episode. Exactly. The best that they've got from a free agency standpoint was Pat Maroon.
I'm sorry, is that back-to-back-to-back Stanley Cup champion Pat Maroon?
Okay.
You saw that picture, right?
Oh, yeah. Now, see, hang on a minute. See, I'll do you one better, because I said on Open Ice Hits that Broads and I kind of spoke that into existence, because of the fact that for 3 shows we brought up, we just brought this up because we got such a kick out of it just even talking about it. There were only 2 other players in history who had won 3 straight Stanley Cups with multiple teams. That's
okay.
So there's only 2. So we look it up because I'm like,
who's the other guy? Right. Who are the other guys?
We go to go. Who are the other guys? And Bros proceeds to tell me, oh wait, hold on, I found it. Here, the last guy to do it was Ed Litzenberger in 1961 to 1963.
Oh, Ed Litzenberger. Why didn't I think about Ed Litzenberger?
Now, here's
obviously everybody knows him. Good old Ed.
First of all, so there's 2 things. First of all, the funny part is that they mentioned it during Game 4, I believe. So I tweet out the screenshot of that on the screen because we literally just mentioned it on the show before. So I'm like, I gotta post this.
Absolutely,
it's too funny. We just literally talked about this. And then I went on the next show after Game 4 because that was our second during the Cup final, and I say we kind of shortchanged these 2 players like as if they were nobodies, because Ed Litzenberger was the captain of the Chicago Blackhawks in 1961, literally the captain of the team, the guy who gets handed the cup first.
That's funny, and
he's one of these 2 players. The other guy, by the way, all the way back from 1920 to 1922. So yes, 100 years ago was Eddie Girard. Now here's the funny thing: people are gonna go, who? Because I know it's a long time ago. We did this when we did the best teams bracket, because we sat there and we kind of said we needed to limit the 50s and 40s teams a little, because we knew people wouldn't even know who to like. We're trying to
Montreal Maroons were.
We're trying to have people vote on it, and we're gonna go. No one's gonna know who was on the 1954 Detroit Red Wings or
who was on the 1913 Montreal Maroons,
right, or something like that. Eddie Girard actually was one of the first original members of the Hockey Hall of Fame in 1945, which to which I've responded to Broads and said on the podcast.
So Pat Maroon's going in the Hall?
No, Pat Maroon is probably not going in the Hall, but I did say to Broads that whenever I do, and whenever it is feasible again to make the trip to Toronto and go to the Hockey Hall of Fame, like it's long overdue for me, I am going into the specific area that is known as the. Like it's almost like the Hall of Greatness, if you will, because all the trophies are there and the plaques are on the wall. And I said, I'm going to hunt. I'm going to find Eddie Girard's plaque, and I'm taking a picture of it and sending it to you.
That's funny
because we've had too much fun with this segment, But
for any of our listeners that might have missed it, when the Tampa Bay Lightning get the cup and they all celebrate. When they all get on the ice to do the picture, right? You know the picture I'm talking about. Front page of the newspaper, the whole team crowded around the cup. Everyone's holding up their 2 for back-to-back.
Right.
But if you zoom in on Patrick Maroon,
so this was
Patrick Maroon is holding up 3 fingers. So he's won back-to-back.
Actually, it was really funny because I got it wrong when I was at, because my wife was sitting on the couch as it was over, and I'm kind of back and forth between the computer and watching it on TV, and she goes, what's all the fingers for? Because she goes, there's people holding up 1s, 2s, and one guy's got 3. And I turned around and I said, well, the 3 is he's won 3 in a row. So he's holding up 3 for that. And I said, the 2's back to back. And I said at the time, oh, the 1 is just what everybody does.
That's just what you do. We're number one. Yeah.
No, that was guys like Ross Colton and David Savard who weren't
on the team last year.
Right, so
Yeah.
that's their first. So everybody held up their
They
number.
absolutely talked about it. 100%. You can't
come
convince
on.
me otherwise. Patrick Maroon, chest out, when I'm holding up
Okay.
3 fingers.
Okay, do you know why they probably talked about it in all seriousness?
Because they were up
there's-
3-1 and it wasn't close.
They were up 3-0. Also,
Well,
like
that's
realistically,
fair.
like I'm saying, when you got to the third one and it's 3-0, I think they kind of knew they could prepare for what they might do.
That's You start planning the parade route a little bit when you're the defending champion and you're up 3
By the way, I'm
games
a
to
little
nothing.
I'm a little tiny bit surprised about this. The parade thing is tomorrow or Monday for people who aren't,
Really? This far out? That far out? They didn't do it already.
I would have thought possibly Friday from a
Yeah.
Wednesday deal, but it's not. I don't know. I don't know that that's a big deal.
Yeah, that's fair. But sorry, we were done with Tampa. I did also want to talk about the team they actually beat, because
Sure.
Montreal.
We'll keep that banner up then, because we're still talking about the Stanley Cup final.
Yeah, that's fine. Montreal looked. I mean, throughout the playoffs, they were the most surprising team. I don't think anybody would tell you any differently. If you told me you had them getting past Toronto, I might maybe believe you. But I definitely don't believe you if you tell me you had them beaten Vegas in the conference finals. I'm sorry,
Right.
the semifinals. So to come in and even putting up the fight they did, at a certain point, you just run out of gas, right?
Right.
Like Tampa's just like we talked about. They're the dream team. They're the 92 men's basketball Olympic team. Like
I don't even know if it's running out of gas when you run into like you just kind of referred to, like the dream team. That's just. I think it's just running into a team that was so much better than ever. And I said there was a couple things I said about this on the last Open Ice Hits that I'll kind of touch on here, because for one, I don't love playing the what if game, so I'm not going to wonder how this would have gone if Vegas would have won that series, or if the Islanders win Game 7 and it's Montreal Islanders or Vegas Island. Like you don't. Nobody, you can't play hypotheticals in hindsight, right? Like
That's fair.
It's
Hindsight's
fair.
20/20.
It was fair to look at when the Final Four was actually decided and go, well, we could get a couple really good ones. We could get Vegas Tampa. We could get Vegas Islanders, Montreal Islanders. Montreal Tampa was obviously there. Like there's possibilities, and you can think about those possibilities. But what ends up happening is what ends up happening, and you can't change that to try to
That's fair.
make it better for yourself, if you will. Like, you know what I mean? Like. It's not. This isn't hitting random on the teams on NHL 21 and picking out your dream Stanley Cup final. You know what I mean? Like this is, or maybe I guess more or less it is hitting random on NHL 21 because you're randomizing who could get there. That's the beauty. Like, and I remember I referred to it kind of with Broads anyway. Of what's more fun to you, watching teams that you almost didn't expect to be there get there, or knowing that like. I said every sport's different, and I'm not trying to say that there's anything wrong with the way another sport goes. What I'm saying though is that in the NBA you have stretches where it's the same two teams in the final 4
Every year.
years running.
Yeah.
And it makes it like almost to the point where we're like the NBA final this year is the Phoenix Suns against the Milwaukee Bucks, two teams that haven't been there in a long time, decades.
Right.
To the point where it's almost like you're shell-shocked that this was even possible. Oh,
Yeah,
wait a minute.
the NBA is weird because it just functions
where you sit there and
differently
go,
as a league.
Because then you sit there and you go, wait a minute. Golden State didn't make it. The Lakers didn't make it.
More importantly, LeBron's not there.
The Celtics didn't.
You're even naming the players. James Harden's not there.
But that was the difference because Broadstern said, I don't care because I love, he goes, I'm such a big LeBron James fan. I like seeing him in the final. I said, but there's an expectation there, right? Like, there's an expectation, like, in certain situations in other sports, like the NHL.
You can even say the same thing in football with Tom Brady.
Well, right, but there's an expectation that the best, like in the NHL, it's that there's an expectation the best team is going to get there. That's why when the Tampa Bay Lightning win 62 games in a regular season, they were everybody's pick to be the Stanley Cup champion that year, because you go, well, what do we think's going to happen? They're the best team in the league. We kind of expect them to make it that far. Because this all stemmed from a question of what happens to the Montreal Canadiens' expectations now. You've made a cup final, and you maybe weren't, I don't say weren't supposed to, but you weren't expected to.
You overcame some odds to get there.
Well, right, but like, but at the same time, like Broads does a show on his channel called Coffee with Broads. It's a live stream every weekday morning at 9 a.m. And in a bit of a different scheduling twist, when we did the last episode, after the Cup final was over, knowing we weren't competing with an additional game to come, which would have been on Friday night if there was a Game 6. Then we pushed back. We actually did the show. We recorded mid-afternoon as opposed to early morning, which would be before he does this show. Right. So he goes on and is talking about the Tampa Bay Lightning winning as part of his Coffee with Brocha, where he gets comments. And so he was reading off a few that he had gotten during this stream on when we recorded the show, because he's talking about people going, oh, like kind of in a way like that Montreal fluked their way there. They were, Carey Price literally carried them there, and that's how they got there and things like that. And I turned around and I basically countered it because I said something about the adversity that they overcame as a team to eventually get there. And I mentioned 3 different occurrences over each series that they won. They were down 3-1 to Toronto. They find a way to come back and they win, right? You're down 3-1 though. So you have to overcome long odds down 3-1. You have to win 3 games in a row against that team that on paper is better than you.
Yeah, and they really outplayed them in the back half of that series. I think people forget.
That's number one. Yeah. Then you go on and play Winnipeg, and you rally around Jake Evans, your fallen teammate, in Game 1 when you win. And this, to me, the series was over. Done. They're going to rally around this kid.
Winnipeg not having Mark Scheifele is also part of it.
Oh, yeah, I know. But that's also because we knew that was coming, too. That's what I'm saying. So from the second it happened, you go, well, now he's going to get suspended, and they're going to rally around this kid.
Yep.
So collectively, this series is over. Then they get halfway through the Vegas series, and their coach gets COVID.
Yep.
Now he's out. So now you have Luke Richardson serving as acting coach, and they win that series. John Cooper even said before the Stanley Cup final, nobody flukes their way to the Stanley Cup final. You might be able to, I don't want to call it fluke your way through, but you might get lucky and get bounces and make your way through a round and go, oh, you know what? That was there were some breaks.
You might even be able to see a team squeak through 2 rounds,
but you don't get all the way there.
You don't get 3 rounds.
You don't get 4 wins away from the ultimate prize by being lucky the entire time. You got to be
3 wins away at the end.
Right, but by the time they were 3 wins away, the series was
you're not wrong.
More or less over. So
listen, if Montreal had reverse sweeped Tampa, if they had come out and won Game 5, Tampa's got to start doubting themselves, right? Like, yes, it's the team that won the Cup the year prior, but it's also the team that blew it to the Blue Jackets the year before that. So
I think, boy, we're gonna get onto this topic now too, because Broads asked me if I saw, which of course I did, saw Nikita Kucherov's post game.
Oh, Nikita Kucherov's post game, man! Now I love it.
Here's the thing, in all seriousness, from that, I actually believe they didn't want to go back to Montreal.
Oh, I agree.
I believe that from and he turned it into
a kind of some relief in there.
Well, yeah, because he turned it into a shot at the fans, and I don't doubt that. I'm not saying they couldn't have won a game if it went back to Montreal. I just don't think you want to even chance it.
No, and if you lose Game 5 and it goes back to Montreal, it's tough to say Montreal's losing that Game 6. Carey Price isn't letting a goal in, that's for sure.
Well, I don't know about that. I felt that way in Game 5 as well, or in Game 4 as well. And
in Game 5 he barely did.
In Game 4 when they actually did get the lead, and then. Honestly, it was 2.5 minutes away in the second period from me seeing this game go to the third and going, it's over. Yep. They haven't scored yet, and they're not going to score tonight. He's not letting one in. Yep. And then they did score, and it wasn't Carey Price's fault that they scored those 2 goals in that game. They were both empty nets, basically.
Right.
But they found a way. It was closer to being over than we thought. I mean, let's this way. It was 1 power play goal away from being over because Shea Weber took a costly penalty.
Terrible penalty.
With 3 minutes left in the third period with 1 minute left in the third period that carries over for 3 minutes into overtime, and they kill it off and then score 2 minutes later.
Yep. That was such a huge penalty kill, and even though you only won 1 game, you only blah blah blah, you have some really solid things to go out on. I know it's tough for the Montreal players at this point because you were this close and the pain, and you saw all the Canadians go up and kind of support Shea Weber after the end of Game 5. But they have a lot of good things to hang their hat on. They had an incredible run.
And I genuinely appreciate it. I mentioned this on Open Ice. I genuinely appreciated how long the handshake line was.
Those guys cared.
That was a massive showing of respect for 2 sides that battled it out. And even though It's funny because Broads texted me as Game 4 was preparing to go to overtime, or as we were talking about where we go from here and things like, and kind of even knowing that, we both kind of made the assumption falsely that Tampa Bay having a 4-minute power play with a minute left in the third period meant series over.
I think we all did. I certainly did.
I even put on Twitter I was feeling a Kucherov goal because he hit the post moments earlier, and I'm like, I'm feeling one here. It's going to be Kucherov. But beside the point.
Man, that post-game presser would have been even more wild.
He texts me and says something about, like, what a disappointing series. And I understand, like, where you're coming from with that. Like, it's disappointing because of the fact that it only lasted 5 games. It wasn't long.
You want to see a closer series. You want to see a more competitive, longer.
Well, you know what it is, too? Because, like, we're going to look at it. Anybody who watches the game closely will look at it and go, you know what? In hindsight, here's how close the series really was. Montreal outplayed Tampa in Game 2, ended up losing 3-1 because Vasilevsky stood on his head.
He played incredibly. That game won him the Conn Smythe.
Actually, I'm sorry. It's 2 reasons. Vasilevsky stood on his head and was outstanding in that game, made nearly twice as many saves as Carey Price did. Yep. And then, or actually probably did, because I think the shots were 43-23.
It was wild. Yeah.
So considering that Tampa Bay scored 3 goals, Carey Price had 20 saves. Andrei Vasilevsky had 42. So he doubles him up on saves.
I think that's the game that won him the Conn Smythe.
It could be. That's number 1. But number 2 is, if Blake Coleman doesn't score that diving goal at the end of the second period with
incredible.
A second left, I don't know if we're talking about the same series.
Incredible.
Right.
Yeah. That goal was
insane. It is incredible.
Blake Coleman is ridiculous when he's diving. He's just going to start diving towards the net just randomly.
Right. But it's series changing, series defining. Like, we're not going to talk about Ross Colton's goal that won Game 5. We're not going to talk about the goals in Game 4. We're not even going to talk about the onslaught of goals in Game 3, where it's, look at what Tyler Johnson's doing. Look at Kucherov. It wasn't Kucherov. I'm sorry. Who was it I'm thinking of? Well, Victor Hedman had a goal in there, and Jan Ruda has a goal, and who was the other forward that scored? It wasn't
Cirelli, was it?
No. It's killing me now that I don't know who it was who scored that third goal.
Well, either way,
it's. I think it's. I want to say it's. No. Wait a minute. It was Kucherov because he had 3.
It was Kucherov. Right.
So I did think about that because it was the 2-0.
Right.
That's what I'm thinking of. Anyway, like, we're not going to talk about those. That's the goal that people are going to talk about. It's Blake Coleman's diving goal. So that's a game changer, series changer, the whole thing. But that game's close. That game's really close the entire way through. And actually, it's still even 2-1 down to the final 5 minutes. And a big mistake is made, and that's what ends up being the nail in the coffin in that game. So Game 1, Montreal looks outmatched. Game 2, they're the better team throughout. They give up 3 goals, and their goaltender is near perfect. So it's 3-1 as the final there. Game 3 is kind of this weird back and forth. They get off to maybe one of the worst starts you can get off to in a game because they go down 2-1 or 2-0 before it's even 5 minutes in. But then they play better throughout the rest of the first period, get a goal. Now they're looking better. And again, they kind of come out. They give up the third one. They eventually give up a fourth. Then they get one back, and it's like, okay, hold on a minute, because it's 4-2. There's like 4 minutes left. Start watching for the goalie. Price is going to go, and maybe it'll be 4-3, and it'll be interesting again. Like, it's there. And then they give up another one, and that one wasn't that close. Then they do win a game in overtime, 3-2, and then they lose 1-0 in the clincher. So 3 of these games were essentially 1-goal games for majority, or at least they played better at times than Tampa did.
Certainly.
So if you can say that in 3 out of 5 games. You could be looking at a 3-2 series either way. You could be looking at 3-2. Like, you could be looking at 3-2 Montreal.
Montreal Canadiens have absolutely nothing to be ashamed about coming out of this series.
No, not at all.
Absolutely not. Yeah.
And that's the key. Like, you got to be mindful of the fact that, like, just because on paper you're going to look at it in history and go, oh, it was a 4-1 series. It wasn't even that close. This is like, that was boring. Like, no, it was some good hockey in there. And it was close. And it was close. Like, I can tell you, like, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Game 1 or Game 3 was the best game I've ever seen and had me glued to the TV. It was lopsided at times, but Game 2 was good. Game 4 was good. Game 5 was outstanding.
Great. Game 5 was fantastic hockey. And you do see that a lot of times, right? The game that the Cup gets decided is often a spectacular hockey game. And as we declare another champion, Andrei Vasilevsky got the Conn Smythe. And that kind of puts a neat little bow on the 2021 NHL season. We will talk about the awards a little later on in the show, but we do actually have some Flyers stuff.
I did say when it came to Canadians too. By the way, especially since we had to, truthfully, we had to talk about them so much a year ago during the playoffs and in the bubble because of the series against the Flyers.
Remember when the Flyers were good?
We'll get there later. But after watching them win a series in 4 against Pittsburgh, where you needed 3, so it was a 3-1 series win, and then after watching them find a way to take the Flyers to 6, and now do this with this cup run, I even said this on Open. I said, I hope that people have them on their radar as a playoff team again, and don't just dismiss them as, well, they were the 18th best team in the league or the 24th best. Like, they're a playoff team. They can
playoff, and playoff Carey Price is different, and we saw that this year.
I do think he needs help.
I agree, and Jake Allen should be a good resource as a secondary goalie for them next year. Yeah.
He's not getting any younger, and that's not a knock. I'm not saying like that.
No, it's just the truth.
Because let's put it this way: was it any question if Montreal wins the Stanley Cup, who's winning Conn Smythe? It's going to be Carey Price.
No,
by a mile.
If that series went 6 or 7 games, there was a chance Carey Price won it, even in a losing effort.
I thought that for a little bit, but I think Vasilevsky was too good in closeouts to even think about that. Not to mention after losses.
But if Game 5 is 1-0 the other way, all of a sudden the conversation's open again.
The funny thing too is, to me anyway, is that there was almost a sense that you didn't even like Vasilevsky seemed like, and I even said it is an easy choice because when I think you look back on it, you go how good he was in Game 2 and then how great he is in closeout games. Like it's almost like you just know, you expect that when it's 3 whatever in a series, then he's going to post a shutout right now. That's what you expect almost. So he's that good. But there was almost like you could have made the argument for, well, Kucherov could have won it. Kucherov had 9 more points than the next guy on the list, which was his own teammate in the playoffs. Like, you know what I mean? Like he was that good.
He went ballistic. Yeah. He played like he didn't have a regular season.
I hear you. Nice shot. But it actually is almost funny to me that it overshadows Braden Point's goal scoring in the first 3 rounds too. Like he's the 3rd guy that comes up.
Yeah.
You know?
It's wild.
And he scored 14 goals in 3 rounds to the point where you kind of thought going into this series, he's probably got 2 or 3 more in him. So he'll end up with like 17 goals in whatever number of games they played, 22 or 23 or something like that. Cause they got through most of these, like they got through a couple of these series in, I don't want to say short order, but like these weren't complete. They only played 1 7-game series.
Right.
Like it's not like they had to go the distance an awful lot. Like who else did Tampa play leading up to? Because Tampa played Carolina in 1-6. They played Florida in 1-6. And realistically, like I look back at that Florida series and I go, that wasn't even close in reality. No. Like it went 6 and Florida won 2 games. That wasn't even close.
It was never in question. No.
Carolina had a game there for the taking and Carolina I think was 5 actually, not 6. Now that I think about it, but Carolina. The reason that I'm saying this is because Carolina had the one thing that Tampa hadn't had happen in the longest time. They were on their way to a back-to-back win,
right?
And you're up 4-2. You've got it in your grasp, and the end of that second period in that game 4 was as brutal as I've seen. Like you can't give them power play after power play. And I don't care if you love the officials or hate them or think they're great or think they're god awful. Doesn't matter. You can't keep taking penalties against that team and expect to come out of it clean. And it says an awful lot about the Montreal Canadiens that they did not lose this series on special teams.
I agree. And
they lost this series on great goaltending and opportunistic 5-on-5 goals because that's what a lot of it was.
Yeah, and we saw all postseason long that Tampa Bay's power play was absolutely dominant. Now, all right.
On to the big stuff.
I think it's time we take a transition here and hit the offseason. We're going to shift our focus here mostly to the Philadelphia Flyers. If you're an NHL fan and you're bailing on the show at this time, follow us on Twitter at YWT Podcast. Subscribe on YouTube, et cetera, et cetera. Also, stick around.
Well, listen, in fairness, as much as we are going to shift and talk Flyers for the off-season portion of this, when it does roll around, I mean, when we do, I believe one of our next shows is going to be right after the expansion draft is over and the NHL draft is over. We will most certainly talk about what Seattle's team looks like. We will most certainly talk about the picks that will go leading up to, like the Flyers don't pick until 13th in the draft. There are going to be guys who go higher that we will make mention of. As a matter of fact, ironically enough, I bought my draft guides last night.
Nice.
I was doing a quick browse. I think I know who I'd love for the Flyers take. I don't think he's going to be there if I'm honest, but
Okay.
I would love. All right, well, listen. Then I'm putting more. I'm spreading my chips around here a little bit. There's two guys I would not hate if the Flyers took that probably are top 10 worthy, but we will see because
it's such a weird year. Yeah.
I can't tell you the number of look. Nothing against, because I use multiple draft guides when I do all this stuff. Nothing against some of the others. The best one, in my opinion, is Hockey Prospects Black Book. It is outstanding because not only does it list more information about the player, they get quotes from not only their own scouts in their own reports, but other NHL scouts,
right?
And a majority NHL scouts and scouts that are writing specifically for this book and for this outlet. A majority would sit there and say, listen, to me, this kid is blank, like top 10.
Right.
But it's been such a weird year that we just don't know how people are going to evaluate them.
We know Owen Power's going number 1, and then we throw the rest in we know Owen Power is probably going number 1.
I think he should go number 1 if I was making the pick. I can't speak to that.
Everything else, you're just throwing the lottery balls up in the air even more so than normal.
How about this then? I will tell you what I don't want to say that because I think I'm going to be wrong if I say it that way.
Trade 13 for Eichel.
No, that's not what I was going to say.
That's not what you were going to say? Okay.
No, when it comes to the draft, I will not be shocked, and this is going to go against, because I'm not even going to, because this is the opposite of speaking something into existence.
Okay. Oh no.
No, I'm not going to speak this out of existence. So I'm not going to mention the players I would like to see the Flyers have on the radar out of this draft, while being realistic, because I'm not going to sit there and tell you, oh, I think the Flyers should have Owen Power on their radar. Like Owen Power's going to be long gone. And listen, I love Matty Beniers, but he's going to be long gone.
I'd love Matty Beniers too, but it ain't happening.
I would not be shocked if a Michigan player went number 1.
Okay.
I'm being safe.
Hot take. Good old hot take Kevin again.
It's
good
so
old hot take
so
Kevin.
Not a hot take. The one guide has 3 Michigan players on the cover because there's 3.
It must be midsummer with a take that hot. Ooh, baby.
I think a Michigan player is going number 1 to Buffalo. That's what I will say.
All right. We will.
One of Cam York's teammates is going at number 1. I think. I don't know for sure, but I wouldn't be shocked.
So like Kevin mentioned a minute ago, we will be doing kind of full breakdowns of the draft and the expansion draft and et cetera, et cetera.
I also do think, by the way, free agency is going to be fascinating this year.
Free agency is going to be
like league wide. Obviously, I don't know. Look, I can't speak. We'll get into the Flyer stuff in just a second. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm not going to profess to know what's going to happen. I
know Taylor Hall is probably going to sign in Boston. That's about all I know. And I don't even know if that's a hot take.
Right.
Because he very clearly loves it there and got himself traded there and is just very clearly going to sign a nice, clean contract with them. But while we kind of work our way, I think our next show will be a pretty good free agency show. I think today's show...
It's the expansion wrap / and to be honest, we'll have to...
We'll talk off the air about this.
Right. Well, because we're going to have to coordinate everything again. We normally over the summer, we don't do the back-to-back weeks thing. I think we might have to from expansion draft to free agency, just for 2 reasons. Just because free agency is not the same as it typically is. There's no, look, there is, but there's not. There's no true tampering period where there's a week leading up to. So deals, we experienced this last year. Deals were not exactly happening at the rapid fire rate that they were in previous years. Like we sat there on the day of free agency, whatever that was. I think it was like October or something or other, mid-October.
Something like that.
And we sat there waiting to see where people would go and who's signing where and for how much and what's happening. And for the better part of 2 to 3 hours, we just sat there going, oh, the best thing we've got is Luke Shen signed with Tampa, and
there you go. There's their big free agent.
Yeah, a guy who didn't even play in the Stanley Cup final at all. Literally, I looked it up.
But he's their big free agent because Luke Shen is a very large man.
By the way, that was one of the speaking. We didn't really because after I kind of touched on them. We didn't go off off on it afterwards. The Kucherov presser was great. There was a picture on Instagram that he's taking a picture. He's got Luke Shen with him, and Braden Shen was there to celebrate.
Oh, I did see that. And he's hitting him in the face.
And he goes, "It took me 2 years, but I got payback." And then it's great.
Turns out winning back-to-back cups can heal a lot of old wounds.
I think running on
especially when you're playing with his brother,
or running on adrenaline and getting Bud Light deals cannot really make it heal.
Man, there is no way that contract can hold up in court because there's no way you can prove he was sober when he signed it. There's no way. It was signed way too quick after that presser.
The funny thing is I actually saw that Andrei Vasilevsky got one too. And I actually fully believe he was completely sober.
I believe that too.
Process. He seemed so even keel, like it was no big deal.
All right,
Kucherov's out here calling out people, and bring on your questions.
I cannot wait till he shows up in Montreal next year. The Boos are going to be good because they're going to play the clip back. It's going to be great.
I think it's going to be great that we're just even going to be able to hopefully experience that again.
I hope so.
The normal, that was another good article too, as we're still on off-season stuff and not specifically Flyers yet. The stuff from the past year that you would go, should it stay or should it go? Because it sounds like homestand style series are going to stick around. I don't mind that. I do. What was the thing they said that needed to go? That was worth. Oh, what needs to go is divisional play, division
only.
Right, this divisional. Well, not only division only play, but in the playoffs.
Okay.
Divisional playoffs. They love the reseeding of the semifinal, which
it's not going to go anywhere.
I don't think it's going to go anywhere, but I understand where people are coming from with
I don't hate reseeding. I don't mind getting rid of Eastern
the
Western Conference.
in the semifinals was great.
I don't mind getting rid of Eastern Western Conference. That's fine with me.
But beyond that, I'm trying to think of what else. I mean, I could pull that up really quick, but we need to talk Flyer stuff.
Those super intrusive and definitely problematic helmet ads.
The helmet ads are here to stay.
I know they are. I was being sarcastic. They were not a problem beyond the first 5 minutes you watched.
Right. I was going to say not only that, but unless you truthfully care so much about the jerseys aren't billboards, right? That's another thing about it. The jerseys didn't turn into billboards, so let's just leave it at that.
Fair.
I can live with an ad on a helmet.
Right.
Oh, good. It was the first thing up here. I wanted to see it really quick because I knew there was some good stuff in here. I just want to see. So, okay, it says so ditch the all-Canadian division because it was, it was fun while it lasted, but what was it? If we're being honest, it's not necessarily in the NHL's best marketing interest to have a Canadian team seated in the Final Four every single postseason because it's not always going to be an original 6 team.
Right. That's fair.
Stay the reseeded Final Four. Go divisional playoffs. Stay homestand schedules. Go. Oh my God. This was great. So go varying degrees of audio quality. It had to do with Zoom calls. This was actually good though. I did like this. Stay occasional Zooming because it said not the media landscape shifts. Not every publication can send reporters to every game on the road.
I agree.
The NHL needs to do everything it can to encourage widespread quality coverage of the product. Holding video conference availability with select players and the head coach could certainly help.
I agree with that.
And then this is the funny note on the end of it. Or failing that, just make sure to continue having Nikita Kucherov doing them, preferably after happy hour.
Preferably shirtless.
Then some of this stuff was arena stuff. So go paperless tickets. At least give the option.
Okay, sure.
At least give the option to own a paper ticket because people like to collect.
Sure, whatever.
Stay, grab and go food. The no contact concessions purchases was
sounds great. Yep.
They've had these things forever at airports. Now they're in hockey arenas. So the majority of your life during intermission isn't spent in the bathroom line and the beverage line.
But truly.
Go coaches wearing masks. Stay caring more about everyone's mental health.
Sure.
No, I get where they're coming from with that stuff, by the way.
Sure. Yeah, that's fair. All right. So we're gonna shift to the Flyers here, and our first.
Let's just do a couple stuff.
Oh, we're just going to this. Okay.
Yeah, we kind of
like this.
We can talk expansion draft stuff, but that was more up there as an off-season thing. We did. I
think the expansion draft ties into one of the names on this list here.
Potentially.
So, In case you're not watching our YouTube channel, we just popped up our Flyers rumors tab for our next conversation here. It's been a while since our last show that we were both here for. And since then, the rumors have kind of been hot and heavy. We've heard all sorts of names from Seth Jones to Jake Voracek to, whispers about Jack Eichel, but that's a little smaller. That's everybody.
Keyword rumors. I mean,
right, of course.
Very keyword rumors. Like, it's been tired.
I am willing to say at this point, the Flyers being heavily interested at one point in Seth Jones, I'm willing to say that's more than a rumor. I'm willing to say that was probably fact, that Chuck Fletcher seems to have been very interested at one point in time in acquiring Seth Jones. Now, it doesn't seem like that's going to make a lot of sense because it doesn't seem like he's going to re-sign here.
Okay, here's what I will say to get this ball rolling on this topic. It seems like the primary source of this information and these rumors has typically gone back to 31 Thoughts and Elliot Friedman, and who does a great job. He's so reliable when it comes to this stuff.
Elliot Friedman tends to know things.
Right. If he's putting something out there, there's chances are there's legitimacy behind it.
If he's putting it in 31 Thoughts,
right,
he knows it.
Right.
He knows
here's where I'm at with this. It is sounded to me at one point in time like he basically even said they are going out and looking at anything they can. So Seth Jones is just part of this. They will look at Dougie Hamilton. They will look at Matt Dumba. They'll look at all these names that you can think of because of the fact that they feel like not that they have to, but it's like there's this sense of doing your diligence and looking around and looking at the options. If you've heard a name tied to the Flyers on a defensive side, chances are they will look at it or have thought about it.
Had the conversation.
So right. Go beyond the three I just mentioned. Throw Adam Larson into the mix because his name has come up before. And I'm not saying that they all have to be earth shattering. The bottom line is that and it was the funny part because I've seen a lot of people on Twitter who sit there and there's varying opinions of anybody they can get. You mentioned Dougie Hamilton, and half the people go, "Yes, do it," and the other half go, "No, he's too offensive minded. He's not going to be good for this. He's not going to be."
I'd be very happy with Dougie Hamilton. Yeah.
I hear you. And then I see the same thing about Seth Jones, and then I see people, Matt Dumba's name comes up, and people go, "No, he sucks." Adam Larson, no, he doesn't fill the void the right way, because I know I've said it before. Their biggest need is to put somebody next to Ivan Provorov. That's the biggest need of the offseason, and that's fair. It's fair to say. Here's the thing, okay? I don't care if it's Seth Jones, Dougie Hamilton, Matt Dumba. I don't care who it is. I would be willing to lay a wager that player, whoever it is probably better than the guy you picked up a year ago.
Yeah, 100%.
Or better than the guy you used as your whipping post for the last 7 years.
Right. Is he better than Justin Braun?
Not even that. Is he better than Andrew McDonald? Is he better than Eric Gustafson? This is what you've watched.
I'm sorry, that would be Stanley Cup finalist Eric Gustafson to you, sir? He was playing in the Stanley Cup finals, excuse me.
Only 3 games. For only 3 games until he had 2 god-awful turnovers.
He was terrible.
He wasn't. Here's the funny part.
Tampa might give him a ring.
He wasn't. Funny part is he wasn't half bad. And I say half bad lightly. I'm not he was exactly where he was meant to be in terms of number 6 on that depth chart at that time. But he wasn't half bad in. He wasn't half bad in the Winnipeg series and the Vegas series because he wasn't killing them. He wasn't necessarily winning them games, but he wasn't killing them. Let's just be real.
Not a problem, and that was his biggest asset.
There you go. But this is what you've had to deal with as a franchise for years, right? You've had to watch these guys who else? You can say that about when Luke Shen was taking up playing time regularly, right?
God.
This is like sitting there trying to this is like trying to say that and it's an awful example to use because I think anybody would take this guy on their team right now, especially after watching what he just did in the Stanley Cup final. But it's like somebody sitting there saying they hear the name Blake Coleman and go, "No, he sucks." And then you have to sit there and remind people that, you know what, for 4 years you lived with Chris Van de Velde on your team. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Remember that,
Andre Mazzaro's top pairing defenseman.
I actually didn't hate Andre Mazzaros as a depth guy.
Right. As a top pairing defenseman, though.
No, I know.
A second power play unit guy.
Andrew McDonald and Eric Gustafson and guys like that, and Luke Shen and guys like that.
The first Eric Gustafson
make Braden Coburn look like a Hall of Famer. because Braden Coburn
Flyers legend, and also Tampa Bay Lightning legend.
Well, the reason, and the reason I say that is because Braden Coburn, then when you look back on it, you go, guy wasn't bad, like guy gave you some really good years over the course of that time. Like when you look at what they've had since.
A couple years ago, the Tampa Bay Lightning had Luke Schenn,
Braden Coburn
in their lineup, and were a very, very, very good team. And I questioned everything I knew as a Flyers fan. And then it turned out that those players sucked, and Steven Stamkos and Nikita Kucherov are just that freaking good.
Is it just that though?
Victor Hedman helps.
Oh, I was gonna say that.
Andrei Vasilevsky helps.
Okay, yeah, that does help. I'll give you that. Is it that, or is it John Cooper's just a really damn good coach?
I think that's also the case.
Because I'll tell you what, we've talked a lot about other coaches on this show when we watch certain things. We like one of our favorite go-tos is Rod Brind'Amour. We sit there and we talk about Rod Brind'Amour, but we sit there and talk about Rod Brind'Amour and go, I'm going to run through a wall after listening to this guy speak. He loves his players so much, and I'm now motivated just as much. I was watching some of the Quest for the Cup episodes. John Cooper gives some good motivational speeches in the locker room. Like, without yelling about it and stuff, he goes in and just kind of gets right to the point, and you feel ready to go after that. He's good.
Real quick, just because we're speaking of fiery, passionate speeches, and you weren't on the show, what do you think about Dave Haxtell in Seattle? Fiery, passionate, get the boys riled up speeches, right?
Rhodes nearly fell out of his chair when he mentioned it. He was laughing so hard.
Me too.
Okay, I turn around and I said this. If everything is true to form as we know it, the Seattle Kraken
they're winning the cup.
The Seattle Kraken will win a Stanley Cup within 5 years.
They're going to win the cup within 2 years. That's how it works.
I don't think they're going to win. No,
Alain Vigneault will still be employed by the Philadelphia Flyers.
No, I will tell you why I don't think it's going to happen within 2 years, because I don't think that this team is going to be as good as Vegas was.
I disagree with that firmly.
I don't, and I'll tell you why.
I think you're underestimating how much cap hell other teams are in.
All right, I'd have to see the roster. I don't think the roster is going to come out looking as good.
And when you saw the Derek Englund, Riley Smith Vegas lineup, you didn't think it looked good either. Nobody did. I didn't hate Riley Smith, to be honest. Okay, but you know what I mean. You didn't look at that lineup and think even playoff team.
I didn't think William Karlsson was a 40-goal scorer, and I didn't think that. I mean, well, see, here's the difference too. What you've got to do is that it's funny if we looked at, honestly. That's the team that's going to the Stanley Cup final for Vegas, and it's probably the worst, the weakest group of the bunch.
Yeah, because there's something about that chip on the shoulder, man. There's something real about that expansion group. Other teams didn't want us. There's some Disney magic in it.
They did have a great goalie though,
and
Marc-Andre Fleury had a resurgence.
There is a 5 to 10% chance in my book that Seattle ends up with the same goalie.
I'm disappointed in this then, because and I'll tell you why. It's not that he's going to go there. I'm disappointed because there was such an opportunity. I'm sorry, Seattle. Dave Haxtell, you had Gerard Gallant right there, and he could have been the first.
He was right there.
He could have been the first coach of another expansion teim, and then you could have taken the same goalie.
It would have been incredible. Could you imagine?
That's what even? How do you even describe it? That's not even running it back. That's
At that point,
that's like trying to run it back without having a team.
At that point, you call Derek Englund just to see where he is these days.
Who else could you take from that original Vegas team?
Reed Duke. He's probably not doing anything.
I forgot about Reed Duke. That's good.
The only reason I know his name, fun fact, is because there is a professional Magic the Gathering player also named Reed Duke.
Really? Okay.
Fact. Yep. And he tweeted about it. He's like, wait, I'm playing hockey now? What? It was very funny. Who else was on that original team, man? That original Vegas team, like you said, it was probably the worst team that Vegas has iced to this point, right? You don't have Mark Stone. You don't have Max Pacioretty. You don't have Alex Pietrangelo. That original Vegas team.
Yeah, but that speaks to what they've built from the original year, because I think as soon as the biggest thing for Vegas the first year they were in existence was not that it was like the bunch of misfits that decided we're going to play for each other and play with a chip on our shoulder and make a run. It was that as that happened, I mean, you have to go all the way back to the very beginning of October, their first year in existence. They hadn't even played a game yet. And the city goes through a tragedy, and now they have to be community representatives now too.
That's fair.
Now you have to be there for your community. So now they build a bond with the community. That means people are showing up. And now the team's good. So now the team's good and people start showing up. And now all these other teams around the league or all these other players around the league are going, I wouldn't mind playing there. Like getting traded there isn't the worst thing in the world. Like,
here's the hole in that logic is that they pre-sold all their season tickets 2 years before that shooting happened. So they already had all the hype. They put the good team on the ice.
But you're not going to tell me that didn't add resale
Oh, it
value.
certainly did, especially if
you're a tourist.
Well, right, especially when you put so much of your PR into Derek England being your first choice, and he's a Las Vegas guy, and if they had won the cup that year, he definitely would have been the one who got it, et cetera, et cetera. But
right, 'cause they didn't even have a captain year one.
They didn't have a captain year one. They rocked the 4 A's or the 3 A's.
Right now, but bottom line being, it wasn't just the fact. Like I understand what you're saying with the whole community aspect. Like the thing I think I'm referring to when it comes to showing that it worked was once you got to the playoffs and literally it's every pregame. We're going to televise
those
every
pregames were so good.
And then all of a sudden everybody saw, look what happens when everything that we perceive about Vegas comes together with hockey. And now look like there's a show before the game starts.
Yep. It was amazing.
And we just were fascinated by this. Look at what they're doing and look at the production value of this and look at what it can imagine what it like beyond
Imagine how
this.
it's going to be when Jerry Bruckheimer's running the show.
Well, not even that, but it's like imagine what it could be in 5 years when they build even more of it. This is year one.
Right, when
and
they have history.
And it's already spectacular. What's going to happen when they actually have history?
What's going to happen when they retire Marc-Andre Fleury's number? Because that's the first number hitting the rafters.
That'd be interesting. I don't know for sure. Like, you know what? It's weird because there hasn't been many
there's not many fresh slates when it comes to retired numbers.
Even down to see, now you're gonna make me check because I want to check the most recent expansion teams prior to this.
Minnesota and Columbus.
Columbus has not retired a number yet, I don't think.
Minnesota, they did that stupid thing where they retired one for the fans or whatever, but I don't know if they've actually retired any numbers for players.
Oh wait, I'm sorry. That doesn't count, does it?
What?
Because this is the list of retired numbers around the league.
Minnesota picked up all the Minnesota North Star numbers, didn't they?
No. It listed Mike Modano as the next one on the list, but it still says Dallas Stars next to it. So this is a list of everybody around the league.
Oh, okay.
Not.
I was going to say, did the Minnesota Wild retire Mike Modano's number even though he never played for them? Because that would be bold.
No, they have not.
Okay.
The Minnesota Wild have retired, as you said, Minnesota Wild fans and number one.
Literally, or whatever.
I guess literally the day of their existence.
Right. Like, listen, I get it. It's cute, but stop. Just stop.
Like, what I'm trying to get at is that, like, has Nashville had a player that you go, we've retired his number because...
David Legwand.
No, okay. Now, here's the thing. It's coming.
He's probably the first one going for them.
No, you know who's going? I'll tell you who's going to be first. It's a layup. 35's gone. Pecorine is going to get his number.
Oh yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I was trying to think if there's anybody else who might slip in ahead of time, and it was just not.
Right.
Yeah, you're right.
But I don't like
Pecorine. They'll hang it up the day he retires. They'll hang it up the day he plays his last game. They'll put the banner out for him.
Here's when I typed in Nashville Predators retired numbers, they clearly do not have. Okay, so in fairness, every team has retired 99 league wide, but like they've pointed out, like being such a young franchise, they have not retired, and this is from March of last year. So, like unless something magically changed during the bubble runs and
they decided to put Zach Parise in there.
Well, this is for Nashville now.
Oh, Nashville. Okay,
but. This literally writes the article as, here are 6 players who should be among the first to have their numbers retired when the time rolls around. Not a bad selection. Shea Weber could be one because he played there he did play there for a long time.
Yeah. I don't think he gets the nod, but I definitely get why he's a name on the article for sure.
This mentions Philip Forsberg, but it's too soon to tell with guys like that, right?
He's got 5 years, 6 years.
Ironically enough, you're right. David Legwand is on this list.
I know. He was their first captain, right?
He was their first Predator. He was the first player drafted.
Right. He was the first Predator. I think they named him captain. It makes a lot of sense. I don't.
Okay, I'm sorry. So he was considered. Wait a minute. Did they do this afterwards? Because I guess they drafted him in the NHL draft first.
Oh, did they?
He was the second overall pick.
They might have done the expansion draft after the draft.
Right. That's what I'm saying. So it might have been that case. But anyway, he's the original. He's played the most games in franchise history at 956. Which
is he still their franchise scoring leader?
Yes.
Yep. I think when you're talking about retiring numbers, guys who have a role in the foundation of your team deserve a spot. That's David Legwand, and that's Marc-Andre Fleury in Vegas.
Okay, so here's the thing. So Pekka Rinne is obviously on this list, and I don't think there's any doubt he will get his number retired. He's got such a history there. He's been there for feels like forever, right? He was picked eighth round back when there were more than 7 rounds. 8th round in 2004.
He was picked in a round that doesn't exist anymore.
Right. Franchise leader with 359 wins and 58 shutouts. Like I think those numbers. Yeah.
Oh, it's an absolute stone cold lock. Like I said, if he decides that next year he's retiring, they'll hang it up the last day of the season. Like
and again, here's one that's a little too soon to tell, but he's got a good foundation for it.
Ryan Johansson?
Roman Josi.
Oh, Roman Josi. Okay.
He's got a good foundation for it. He debuted in 2011, so he's got 10 years of time with the team. 8th on the franchise's goal scoring list as a defenseman, and 3rd on the franchise list with assists at 304. Like there's not a lot of
huge part of that 2017 round.
Sure, exactly.
Huge.
But here's an interesting name that I saw that I think ties into some of the conversation we could be having that I think is fair.
Is it Seth Jones?
No, it's Kimmo Timonen.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. Okay. Kimmo Timonen, that's fair.
And that fits your description because I think he is part of the foundation of establishing a team that has now succeeded.
I think Kimmo Timonen was a big part of taking the Nashville Predators from crappy expansion team to like actual NHL franchise with a shot at making the playoffs. Yep. I think Kimmo Timonen deserves a huge spot on that list. I don't know if it's jersey retirement number. You'd have to ask a Nashville Predators fan. But I'm certainly willing to. Yeah, absolutely.
He's 8th in games played, and basically, like this article even says, he'd have an even stronger case than he already does if he wasn't traded away in his early 30s.
If he didn't go to the Flyers, yeah.
The irony of that is that he has the same number of years with the Preds as he does with the Flyers.
They were just better years with the Predators.
Well, it's not that. It's the key is that when as a Flyer, it's not going to rank up there like that because a lot of people have long experience that don't get their number retired. The Preds don't have a foundation like that yet. So when you're one of the first superstars of a franchise,
you might get retirement here.
You might get there. Exactly.
I agree.
Big difference. But I don't think in fairness, I don't think any of these but okay, so this is the point I was trying to make because you're trying to put Marc-Andre Fleury's number in the rafters in Vegas already. I don't think that you do that necessarily when there are teams that have been in existence for 20 years that don't have a number retired yet because they're still working on that guy. Whoever that guy is who hangs around long enough that you go, he's been how long did it take before, say, the Ottawa Senators retired Daniel Alfredsson's number?
How long did it take for the Ottawa Senators to make the playoffs once they became a franchise?
I get what you're saying, but what I'm trying to get at is that the guy played 15 years of his career with a team, and then after he retires, you go, oh, well, now that the franchise is 20 years old, we absolutely should retire his number because that's the foundation of it. I'm wondering
for a long time, who was Minnesota supposed to retire? Andrew Burnett?
I'm trying to think of who you could say was one of their true.
It's gonna be Koivu. It's gonna be Mikko Koivu.
Yeah, that's a good one. Mikko Koivu is a good one. Yeah,
that's probably the answer. But it's the whole jersey retirement thing is weird, especially when we're talking about these blank slates, right? Because you don't just have it full of guys from the 70s.
And here's the thing: think about it. Columbus probably doesn't have one either yet, and at least they've also again built something along the lines of.
Oh, they have to get somebody who'll sign a contract to stay there first.
And speaking of Columbus, by the way, I feel like we should make mention of the tragedy there too.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
Mattis Kivlenieks.
Yeah, that's a tough situation.
It was just shocking because I remember the injury struggles that Columbus had all of 18 months ago, last February, and they're playing a game where they're actually to an extent outplaying the Flyers. They're out shooting them something like 30-15,
certainly,
or whatever it was. But the Flyers end up scoring 5 goals. And by the time they scored the 4th one, and it was fluky by that point, they pull Elvis Merzlikins, and in comes this kid who we'd never heard of before. He's relatively new. He's young, and here's Madison gonna make maybe his third NHL appearance ever.
Yeah,
and
I think I was at this game.
It was really weird for me to hear like that this happened and realize like I'm like I know I saw this kid play in a game, and I know he doesn't have a lot of NHL experience, but I saw this kid play in a game.
Yeah, it's certainly.
And I
shame.
went back to go look, and sure enough, there it was. He plays like the last 15 minutes of the third period of a game, even allowed a goal in that game. Because it was that kind of fluky night truthfully, it was that kind of fluky night for the Flyers where everything seemed to be going into the net, no matter how it looked. I mean, they were banking it in off of people. Like,
yeah, I definitely was at that game. I'm pretty sure.
So, but like that's the type of stuff though for a young franchise anyway. That makes, and did he have a long history? No, but if his future was bright, it's like the unofficial official retirement, right? Like it's like Pelle Lindbergh all over again. Now Lindbergh won a Vezina, so I'm not trying to,
they were about to trade Korpisalo or Merzlikins to make room for Kivlenieks on the roster. Like I
actually think it wasn't even that. They basically played the whole thing out, and isn't Korpisalo a free agent? Now?
No, they're going to trade. They've been talking about the fact that they're going to trade one of the two for a while. I'm not sure if Korpisalo might still be an RFA.
Oh, maybe that's it then. Maybe he's an RFA, and there's going to be some stuff. Now I'm looking him up because. But yeah, basically the bottom line is that I believe the story was that Korpisalo was probably the one who was on the way out.
Okay.
And
it was going to be Merzlikins, and
Merzlikins was going to be the go-to, and then Kivlenieks was going to be the guy who was going to follow.
And he was like the young kid, up and coming, kind of felt like a Caden Primo situation in Montreal type of thing.
Korpisalo is a prime trade candidate because he's going into the last year of his contract.
Right.
He's proven that he can start a decent number of games. He only has a $2.8 million cap hit, which is not too over the top for a lot of teams. Then he's a UFA after that.
Yeah, if they end up trading him, he's going to be a great piece somewhere as a solid little secondary backup. But
but it was just rough to wake up and read it. You know what I mean? Like that's the thing. It was rough to wake up and read it, and then hear not only
24 years old, tragic accident,
right? And not only to hear what happened, that and
there's how it happened.
Well, there's not a lot on the how other than like the very basics of it. No, what I'm saying, what I'm actually saying is that like. Okay, so Columbus just changed coaches this offseason. Now Brad Larsen's the head coach of the Columbus Blue Jackets. He was an assistant for a long time. Now he's in the head coaching spot. They kind of interviewed from within, and it makes a lot of sense that that's where they stuck with. I mean, is it going to be I'm going to say the most popular choice? It's probably popular among the players in that room because they know him. Was it going to be the most attractive pick when you thought about the names out there? Like, it still blows my mind, like going back to the Hackstall thing in Seattle, it still blows my mind that Rick Tockett's not a head coach somewhere. That he was out there and he's not a head coach. I'm not shocked that certain teams stayed within. Like we all know eventually that Montreal's going to just drop the interim tag from Ducharme and say you're it. You're going.
Yeah, and they're in talks about it. That news
I do really think that truthfully for Buffalo, as much as there's a lot of things that we can argue they do right or that they whatever, I think they made the right call with dropping the interim tag from Granato and saying you're the coach. They bought in with him a lot more than they had earlier, so I think you made the right call.
He is at least the guy to get them through the worst of it.
So,
I don't know. I don't know if he's the guy that is the coach when they're turned around and a playoff team. If that's ever going to happen in Buffalo, as long as the Pakulas are owning it. But as far as a team at the bottom, Don Granato is not a bad choice at this point. By the way, one more note on. Columbus retired numbers, it's just going to be Rick Nash.
Well, sure, it will be eventually. I would say
it's going to be Rick Nash.
But I'm saying I wonder if like for a long while, and it's not even that it's like a common number typically, but I wonder if you don't see a lot. Like I don't know if you'll see 80 for a long time in Columbus.
I agree.
Because
I completely agree.
When something happens and the impact is this felt. It stays with you for a long time.
It sticks with it. It puts a footprint on the organization,
right?
And it never really goes away. While we're talking about Columbus, now would be a good time to discuss the Seth Jones conversation. So,
sure.
If you've been following Flyer social media is convinced that the Flyers are acquiring Seth Jones, or at least were for a while. 1 year left, expiring UFA, has made it very clear that he wants to test the market, more than likely. Apparently, there are a couple of places he's willing to sign. Generally speaking, he's kind of looking at being a rental for a year somewhere and then hitting the market. What would you give up for Seth Jones if you don't think you're signing him? If you don't think you're signing him, and I know that brings the price down low enough that Columbus probably doesn't say yes.
I wouldn't. All right, so that depends. What are you telling? All right,
do you give up Phil Myers and a first?
No.
Okay.
I can't give up a current player that I think has value of some capacity.
Do you give up Cam York straight up?
No.
Okay. And I think for me, I don't know if Columbus says yes to that. So I think we're looking at no deal.
If he's a rental,
right?
First and a third.
Okay. You would give up a first and a third. You think he makes the team good enough that first round pick doesn't come back and bite you?
It's not that. It's if I'm going to trade for him for a year, then I've got to think the way that a playoff team would. And I'm being broad with this because, like I'm saying, like if you were the Tampa Bay Lightning and you wanted to get this guy for half of a year, if that, 2 months and a playoff run,
right?
Then it might cost you two draft picks to do it.
Right.
But you're willing to do it because you go, okay, that could be like. In the Flyers case, the only way to do this is to make sure, like, the last thing, like, I know that the story, the report with 31 Thoughts and all that stuff was that they've been heavily involved in talks around Seth Jones, but if he's not willing to sign, then they're straying away from it. And I think that that's the right move because in my mind, the way that you get Chuck Fletcher trigger happy with any move that you're going to make is by getting a guy who does not become, let's put it this way, in hindsight, in the pre-COVID world that we were living in the 2019 offseason.
Yeah.
When you go out and you trade Radko Gudas and a pick to get Matt Niskanen and you get trade 2 picks to get Justin Braun, and Justin Braun probably wasn't even factoring into the thought for last season if Matt Niskanen doesn't retire. But you're getting a guy who has 2 years left on his contract, and then you were going to kind of go with where does it go from here? And assuming everything kind of stays as normal as possible in that world, and you play out the rest of the run the way that it was, and there isn't a bubble, and whatever happens, and then you have a normal season with 82 games this year and a normal playoff run. If Matt Niskanen's around and he continues to play at the level he had that first year, do you look into re-signing him on a more team-friendly deal? Do you wonder if he's interested in staying put in the first place too? I mean,
I think at that point, Matt Niskanen was probably looking at retiring at the end of that little 2-year deal.
He might be, but he was only 34 at that point, so I don't know if it's over per se. Like I think a lot of it had to do with what we.
It's a long 34 though, a lot of playoff games.
It was, but here's where I'm getting at with that. Like, I think the desire was definitely still there throughout that year. I think the bubble was what changed things, and
I agree.
I don't know if I want to play like this anymore. I think I'd rather just go home.
I just want to go hang out with my kids. And you know what? And we said at the time, no one to this day, nobody on this show is going to fault him for that.
And by all accounts, he's loving every minute of it because he's just doing what he wants to do. It's his
good
time.
For him. Yep.
Right. But I think that in the back of your mind, if you're Chuck Fletcher, if you're the team that knows how big of a hole this was and knows that you didn't really address it the right way in last offseason for a variety of reasons. The price tag to do it was going to be high. There wasn't really a guy free agency wise that was going to completely fill that void. Like you were always going to there was no Matt Niskanen replacement in terms of carbon copy playing style on the free agent market.
Right.
You kind of had to go out and trade for it.
You couldn't really get Alex Pietrangelo to sign with you.
Right. I mean, well, exactly. But beyond that. So if that's the case, I think in the back of your mind, the reason that you're so turned off by the fact that he would only he would get traded here, but it would be a 1 year and then you'd have to try to sign him after the fact. And it might who knows what kind of year you're going to have and what kind of year he's going to have to feel like you'd want to. I just don't think you're going to be trigger happy on any deal if that's what the risk is. Now you could look there. You've got to balance it because to some end it's worth the risk. You need to go and get a key defenseman. So in that element, it might be worth the risk. If the price is not overly high, then maybe you take the chance and say, you know what? Hopefully we sign this guy long term. But if not, you have to assume that whatever you give up, and that's why my thing is that's why when you ask me what I would do for a rental, I have to think like a team that doesn't worry about what their draft picks or where their draft picks are going and go, then I'm giving up 2 picks and I'm walking away after that because
the problem with that is after the team we just watched play for 56 games this year,
which is why you may bite the bullet and assume the risk.
I don't know if they're Seth Jones away from a playoff berth. They were that
they're not.
bad.
They're not. They're so
well, right. And at that point, you're giving away a lottery first-round pick if you're not careful.
I'm not giving up like the problem I have is, and again, I know there's people who go who will say, well, you might have to include these guys. I'm not hesitant to include a Morgan Frost or potentially a Cam York in a deal if it gets me
a long-term piece. It
right,
can't be for a rental.
Right. Like here's a for example. Okay, if I have to package a current player who makes a decent amount of money with a Morgan Frost with a first-round pick, because that's the deal that it takes to get Johnny Gaudreau from Calgary, and then he's going to sign with me, then I'm willing to assume the risk, because then I'm not going to think about what Morgan Frost could become because I got a player who I'm going to have for 5 years as well.
All right,
you know
ready?
What I mean?
Travis Sanheim, Travis Konechny, Nolan Patrick, and a first-round pick for Jack Eichel.
It doesn't get it done.
You don't think that gets it done? Really?
No, because
I disagree. Buffalo needs bodies bad.
I don't think Nolan Patrick is viewed as a valuable asset by teams. So I think now you're giving up Travis Sanheim and Travis Konechny. I don't think the Flyers would even entertain the idea of giving up both in the deal.
That's fair. I'm not necessarily saying they should.
I'm not opposed. Here's the thing. I cringed more when you mentioned Sanheim than when you mentioned Konechny.
I agree. I think he's a more expendable piece.
Because I think down the line, Sanheim's the piece that you're going to need more in the long term. I'm not saying
you just have fewer defensemen.
I don't want to give up a Konechny either, but I'm saying that if that's what it takes to get something significant done, I don't turn away.
Okay. That's fair.
I'm careful about it, but I don't turn away and say I'm that attached to him. Right about now, the only player I would be that attached to at forward, outside of like the obvious, like with the no move clauses or like a Sean Couturier, is Joel Farabee.
Yeah. I knew that's what you were saying there, and I love it.
Because I can't turn away from the fact that in a year when everybody else can sit there and go, it's a COVID year. It wasn't that great. You couldn't go do this. You couldn't go do that.
Really solid
he had a great year. He had a great year.
Yep.
And he's 20.
And most nights he was the only player who looked like he cared.
Or 20, 21 years old. Like, then what's he going to be when he's 26? I'm not willing to assume that risk.
I can't wait.
The issue with the reason that I don't really the reason that I at least sit there and say you're not making me turn away with Konechny is because of the fact that I sit there and I go, I've seen a great series of years, and then this year felt different.
Right.
And now I start to wonder what's going to happen. You know, what kind of years are you going to get down the road? He almost is in need of a bounce back year because of the fact, and a lot of them are. Like, it's not to say like half the team could use a bounce back year, but he really is
3/4.
Right. But he's really in need of one because of the fact that I don't want to part ways with him because of the fact that I sit there and I go, he's on a relatively team friendly deal for a long time, and
assuming he shows back up.
And had scored 24 goals in each of the previous 3 seasons, one of which was cut short. Like, I'm not fearing his potential to score goals.
I agree.
I just worry now because of the fact that I think that what we saw the one year was 24 over 50, 60 something games. Not half bad. Whatever, I don't even know what the number was this year. It was like 11 or 12, right?
I think Travis Konechny was a player that struggled a lot more than other players with the isolation nature of the season.
I don't doubt that.
We heard about guys suffering from kind of that lack of hangout time, team dinners, et cetera, et cetera. I think Travis Konechny is a guy who thrives on the energy of his teammates.
Right. Now, I mean, here's the thing.
Yeah.
He had 11 over 50. Okay? 11 over 50 when you've had two,
not atrocious.
Right, well, because again, when you've had 24 over 81 and 82 game seasons early on and then had 24 over 66, like, here comes the big step.
It's certainly below pace.
11 over 50 is a below pace on an 82 game season, but it's still probably a 20 goal pace.
17 or 18 for sure. Yeah.
Well, I'm saying over the course of an 82 game season, I'm giving him 32 more games.
Yeah.
And he did miss time with COVID. So I'm not like my point is that even his career high numbers the year before was 61 points in 66 games. And even if that's not realistic from him all the time, like the other numbers are 47 and 49. Well,
Right.
after 50 games and 32 more or 31 more or whatever he was able to play, he was going to hit 50.
Right.
He was going to get 16 more points.
Yeah, you're probably right.
So he's still that, like, if that's what he is, like, it's hard to part ways with a guy who gives you 20 and 50 a year.
Well, speaking of players who we might be parting with that give you 20 and 50 a year, we also heard some rumors about Jake Voracek. And the big rumor kind of hit on by Elliot Friedman in the latest 31 Thoughts is that the Flyers are...
The wording was
ahead,
without any animosity towards. That's not the word they used. He said it's not acrimonious, which means for people who may look at that and go, that's kind of a big word. Because believe me, I understand that there are people who use very fancy words sometimes in their descriptions. It just means that there's not any hatred going around right now with this. It's just been discussed. It doesn't mean that something's definitively happening. It also does not mean that it's out of the question. Like, he's far from protected.
But it certainly seems as though the Flyers are willing to move on, and Jake's not necessarily fighting them on it. And I'm not putting words in anyone's mouth. I'm not, but it seems as though there's a solid to likely chance somewhere in between there that Jake Voracek's time in a Flyers uniform has come to an end.
I think what you're seeing, at least this is the names that I feel like I hear the most about regularly, and it doesn't mean that I have anything on any of them. I just feel like these are the names that keep coming up in discussions, conversations, people that we think are going to go wherever.
That's all the names we think.
Right, but there's a common thread between them. Now Jake Voracek's name's legitimately thrown around. Like,
right.
Now the idea that he could be potentially moved is out there legitimately.
It's tangible. Like like we said earlier, if Elliot Friedman says something in 31 Thoughts, it's because he knows for a fact someone is talking about it.
But I think the reason that this is significant is because it's gone, like, this is not every other offseason that we typically have these conversations where you go, well, they could move on from Jake Voracek. It would probably be time. Like, now
this is real. We have an expansion draft on the horizon,
but not
and
only
we
that,
have a lot of team.
But there's tangible news out there. There's a tangible item out there that says it's been discussed. At the very least, and not only has it been discussed, but it brings up part of the Seattle expansion, and if not, then they'll look elsewhere to try. Well, then that means you're trying to move the deal, right?
Yep.
That's what it sounds like.
That means you're looking to move them. You're making calls.
That's one. James Van Riemsdyk's name keep coming up because for the same reason. It's a big contract. I do think that contrary to Jake Voracek, and it's not to say Jake Voracek doesn't offer value, but I think that I don't think James Van Riemsdyk's value could be any higher than it was after this year with the way
in terms of his contract.
Right.
He is as close to matching his money as he's ever going to be.
The production you got is about as good as I think you're going to get from here on out in a spot where you could actually try to move the deal. So I think that's where you're at with that.
Yeah.
I think that Shane Gostisbehere has a deal that is not terrible to move in terms of what he could give you as a power play specialist. I think there's teams out there that could sit there and go, we could use a guy who just plays third pairing power play minutes, and what if he produces as a defenseman 45 points in a year?
I think it's a movable deal for a movable piece.
I think that if nothing else, I think that is the most likely of the three names I just mentioned to go to Seattle.
I agree.
I don't know that it's going to be. I'm just saying, of those three, that's the most likely to go to Seattle.
Yeah, and I think we've kind of talked for a while about the Seattle draft, and we've talked about the fact that we were hoping, that the Flyers would kind of be in a position to do move an asset and get one of these pieces out the door. I'm not sure you have to do that with James Van Riemsdyk at this point, because here's the thing, is I went through the protection thing on Cap Friendly, did a little mock protection list.
Okay.
I'm not worried about who they take. Here's the thing. If they take Jake Voracek or James Van Riemsdyk or Shane Gostisbehere, then you're losing a quality player, but you're freeing up some cap space.
Are you worried about losing somebody who doesn't have a high cap hit?
Because it's Nico Kubel or Tanner Lazinski, or there's not a ton of huge names that I'm worried about losing in the bottom half of the line.
I don't think it can be Tanner Lazinski, can it?
I don't think so either, but
he's too inexperienced. He doesn't have the experience level needed. But I the name I keep hearing is you're right, a Nick Kubel or a Robert Haig.
Right, we lost Pierre-Edouard Bellemare to Vegas. I think we're kind of in a similar position where you're either losing a player who's not going to kill you, or you're losing an $8 million contract.
The weird thing about it was and Vegas drafted what? It would have been after the 17 season. Going into 18. So after the 2016-17 season, of which the Flyers missed the playoffs that year, actually.
Okay.
But here's the thing.
Well, right, it was an odd numbered year. Of course they did.
You're right. But here's the thing. It was as if, okay, Belmar was a good little player, but that's not as heartbreaking as it could have been because everybody didn't want it to be a Giroux or a Voracek or a whatever.
Sure.
And most of those guys were protected. I get it, but I'm saying nobody wanted it to be a big name or anybody who just barely crossed the threshold, right? Like, don't let it be one. It can't be one of these kids.
One of the big kids, right?
Right. Like, there almost wasn't a
Travis Konechny. I don't think he was eligible, but like,
right.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm saying, like, it was almost like as if there wasn't this fear because of the fact that everybody who was in the top 6 that you would have wanted to keep was going to be protected. Everybody who was new that you were like, well, they're exempt. They don't even need to be protected.
Right.
You kind of almost had the whole thing figured out.
Yep.
And there wasn't this great fear. Like now, all of a sudden, there's like this sense of they need it to be a big contract because, like, and not that like we're trying to will it into existence. Like the point is that like the hope is if it's a big contract that somebody says we're legitimately taking the whole thing. So if it's Jake Voracek's $8 million,
just clean the expansion
or
draft.
JVR's $7 million, or even Shane Gostisbehere's $4.5 million. You're getting something back that makes you go, okay, now I got some money to play with. I can sign somebody for that. It may not be the number one defenseman you're looking for, or your top pairing defenseman you're looking for, because I don't think you can do that on Shane Gostisbehere's $4.5 million.
I agree.
But on $4.5 million, you know what you can do? You can go out and sign a pretty decent 3C and a backup goalie, or partially do that.
And like a really solid third pairing defender.
I don't know if you can do all of that with the $4.5 million, but what I'm getting at is that
there.
Yeah, but that's what I'm getting at. Like what I'm getting at is that with the $4.5 million, you sign a backup goalie and a 3C, or a backup goalie and a third defenseman, or something. Like you open up the money to be able to do it. Because I legit think that you can get 2 really good quality players. Like you can get a good depth forward and you can get a backup goalie for the money that you would get from Shane Gostisbehere's contract and not re-signing Brian Elliott.
I agree.
Like that is upwards of $6 million, and I think that's enough to get quality in those 2 areas.
Yeah, but I know Chuck's talking to Seattle and going, hey, don't you want this $8 million?
Well, right, because at the end of the day, it does not solve your biggest need, and that's what they're thinking of. Biggest need is back-end support. You need to make, if nothing else, you still don't have a goalie problem. Like, you need to get a goaltender who can spot Carter Hart more often than Brian Elliott can.
Worst case scenario, if you end up with Brian Elliott, it's not the end of the world. It's not ideal, but it's not the end of the world.
I think it's time to move on in that regard.
I don't disagree with you there.
But you're right. If that's what they end up going back to, it's not the end of the world, but it's not. Brian
Elliott's going to sign a 1 or 2 year deal at an AAV under 1.5, and everyone's going to be happy.
I would even argue it's going to be a 1. It's going to be a straight up 1 year deal, maybe $1 million, and they keep him around because he likes the area.
Because his kids go to whatever middle school, right?
And he's having a 3rd kid this summer. So
good for them. I didn't even know that. Congratulations.
They did that. One of his last games. Okay. It wasn't the last. I don't think it was the last. No, maybe it was the last game of the year. Because when they played Jersey all those times, more times than you can imagine.
I've attempted to scrub this entire season from my memory.
One of them was his 500th game, though, and in the messages that he got, like his, I think, or no, I'm sorry, it wasn't that. It was over Father's Day. When Father's Day passed, they had a couple of the players' wives send messages. Like, and it was like a lot of them were the ones that just had kids. So like it was like Sean Couturier's wife and James Van Riemsdyk's wife and all that type of stuff.
But sure Claude's wife, right?
No, Claude's wife wasn't.
Oh, really?
But Claude's wife is expecting also. So that's
that's
and they're pretty close at this point. I think like it's next month. Another August baby. I think that's also when their first kid was born in August. Beside the point though. Brian Elliott's wife was on this video and used this as an opportunity to mention to, I guess, the rest of the world. I'm sure he knew by then, but to mention to the rest of the world that, another son is on the way.
Nice. That's awesome. So, I missed that one.
So,
all right. So I think that just about exhausts us for Flyers rumors.
I think so. I mean, look, the cool thing about the rumors at this point is that the Jake Voracek one is more legitimate now than it has ever been.
We have smoke and also fire. Yeah.
And I think at this point, you're thinking that the goal, it sounds like to me, is not necessarily just about who you're trying to get. The goal seems to be very clear, whether it happens at expansion or does not, that the goal is to move a big contract.
To free up some money.
To open up cap space, to change the look of this team. It's not going to change the look completely. Like, you're still riding with Claude Giroux. Carter Hart's going to be your goalie. Defensively, you're going to have Ivan Provorov and I assume Travis Sanheim. I don't think there's desire to move on from him. Phil Myers' name has come up a couple times.
Too many times for my personal liking.
I just don't want to give. I wouldn't give him away for free.
I don't want to trade a defenseman to help make the defense better. That sounds counterintuitive to me.
No, okay, but here...
Well, just in general. Like, I've heard people talking about Phil Myers in a deal for Seth Jones. Phil Myers in a deal to get whoever. Like, why are we trading a defenseman away to help get a defenseman?
The funny part to me, and this goes back to what I was saying about some of the defensemen they've had in the past, is, okay, maybe Seth Jones is not the answer on your top pairing. Maybe he doesn't play. Maybe he doesn't play with Ivan Provorov.
Right.
You know, in the long run. But if he's on your second pairing, is it better than a lot of what you've had over the years? I'd say so. I just don't know how I don't know how I want to be spending the money that he's going to want on a second pairing defenseman. But I'm saying, like, you shouldn't go into this going, gee, I don't think he's a top pairing defenseman, and then worrying about whether or not he fits on the team at all. Like, he would fit on the team because he's better than a lot of what you've had in the bottom three of this group.
Right. If he's your first, right.
If he becomes your number 3 down the road, I don't think you're complaining. And
totally.
And that's that's assuming also on top of everything else, like, you got to look at who's around still. I think Provorov and Sanheim stay. There's clearly a desire to get Cam York on this team as soon as possible.
As soon as possible.
You know, and to let him play. And I don't think he played bad in the few games he got at the end of the year. So I think he's poised to try to make this team. I don't know if he's definitively going to make it, but I think he's poised to try.
If they don't add anybody, I think there's a real chance that he's on the opening night roster.
I also don't think it's awful if Shane Gostisbehere is on this team next year.
I agree with you.
I don't think it's awful. I think the contract is a little bit rough for what his role should be, but I don't think it's awful from a role percent. Like, you just can't play him on the top. You can't play him in the top 4. That's pretty simple.
Right. Now, and here's the problem is with the god-awful garbage team we saw last season. It sure sounds like you want to bring a lot of guys back. There's got to be some turnover,
no.
right?
I don't though, because I'm sitting here saying, like, see, as I mention all those names, but you want to add a Seth Jones or a Dougie Hamilton or whatever, then I'm sitting there going, I don't see how Phil Myers fits into this equation. I might have to use him to get somebody. And
that's fair.
And as I said before, with guys, like a lot of guys, like, I'm sitting here saying Shane Gostisbehere, I don't have a problem with on this team in the role that they finally found to utilize him. Third pairing power play specialist. That's what he is.
If you have the luxury to do that,
right? If you have the luxury to do it, then do it. But bottom line is that, like, maybe Phil Myers at best is a third pairing guy. He was undrafted. Maybe there's a reason why now. Maybe he doesn't just vault to number 1 defenseman because
it's fair.
Because the potential said he could have been. Maybe what he is a third pairing guy. Maybe he's not even long term. He's not a fit for this team. Who knows?
Maybe that's true.
Like, you can't, like, I'm not sitting here saying I want to bring a bunch of guys back. Maybe, like, because actually what I want to do is I want to get a top pair. Like, I'd want to get a top pairing defenseman who plays with Provorov, who steadies him out, then find the right fit to play with Sanheim and make the third pairing round the whole thing out, no matter who it is. And again, I'm like, trust me, what I'm saying is that I'm not heartbroken either way when it comes to Shane Gostisbehere. My thing with Gostisbehere is, if he goes, and I'm not worried about it. Then someone's probably taking the contract. If he stays, I know what his role is after all these years, and I know he can be modestly successful because he did give you offensive numbers in that role.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
He's giving you offensive numbers, and there are a lot of guys out there who play in the league who are offensive-minded defensemen who do the same thing.
Right.
If you fill the void with the other areas, which there's a lot of them, but if you fill the other voids,
that's a role that can be filled.
Right. Then you've got something. But if it comes down to there's too much to fill, then getting rid of him makes sense. Like, having him move on makes sense. It's $4.5 million. You'd be crazy not to think that way. Right. But I'm not heartbroken either way. I look at it like the type of contract that needs to be moved from a forward standpoint is the JVR or Voracek contract. Yeah. If you can move on from that and now use that money,
that frees up some space.
Well, and use that money in a lot of ways, right? Use that money to continue to keep the guys that you know matter at the forward position, right? Like, whenever you have to sign, and it's coming, like you're going to have to sign Joel Farabee.
Yep.
Somewhere down there, you're going to have to look into other guys who are like, if that is what keeps Wade Allison on the team.
Yep.
Then okay, it keeps Wade Allison on the team. If that opens up the money to sign, I don't know. I know a name that people would love to see on the team that's going to be a free agent that's out there, but I don't think he's going anywhere personally. But if that opens up the money and you say that you're going to bring Philip Deneau to the Flyers.
Oh my God, I would love it.
But
Philip Deneau and Sean Couturier on the same team. The defensive center responsibilities would be...
And maybe a healthy Kevin Hayes as your 3.
Man, will anyone score against us on the power play?
Well, I'm not going to go that far. The penalty kill was awful.
Yeah, you're right.
Like, I'm not going to go that far. I'm just saying.
I'm also assuming that they get Dougie Hamilton or Seth Jones.
Those are steps in the right direction, though. That's all I'm saying. Like, I don't solve it all in 1 year. I think that's impossible to do. It's impossible to do when you need a backup goalie, a top pairing defenseman, a third line center. You know, of course, you'd love to add a scoring winger on top of all of that because who wouldn't? But that's a luxury. That's like the 4th thing down the list because I'm not going there right now. I'm not spending. Nope. I'm not taking Jake Voracek's contract saying, gee, I think I just freed it up. Now I want to go and get a guy who eats up all that money who's going to potentially be a streaky goal scorer.
If you've been listening to the show for a while, you know how Kevin feels about adding a scorer.
Okay, and I get it because Broads and I have had this discussion before because Cole Caulfield has emerged, right? And look,
he sure has.
I hate the pressure that Cam York's going to be under to be as good from
to be Adam Fox,
basically, because he needs to be outstanding for them to have passed on Cole Caulfield twice. Oh yeah, if he is, then you've got something. But here's the thing about Cole Caulfield that makes a lot of sense, and I've talked about this on the show before too. You've got a fan base that's kind of apathetic right now. Even if you missed the playoffs this year. If missing the playoffs this year was coupled with Cole Caulfield's college career is over. So in March, at the end of March or in April, when his college career is over, and maybe the Flyers are done for the year in terms of playoff contention at that point.
Sure. But it gives you something to get excited about.
But here he comes, and we're going to call him up really quickly. And not only are we going to call him up, but he's going to start scoring goals at a pretty crazy clip.
He's going to start dumping pucks in the net.
Which means that he's going to, like, people are going to be in love with this kid, which means that his jersey will sell. And it means that next year when it gets started,
and it means the building will be full.
Right. It means you're not going to be able to wait to see what this kid does when it's a full year.
Montreal is going to be full of Caulfield jerseys by the time the next season starts.
Right. And that's what I'm trying to get at. Like, it's not a big deal to pass on a guy who becomes a scorer when you realize down the line, like, he's not the player you need now. But maybe he is because of the fact that for 3 years, he's making $1 million.
Yep. And that would sure be nice right about now.
And for 3 years, he's making $1 million to emerge as a potential. And that, look, Joel Farabee can do that too, to an extent, but not with the same flash that this kid does. And I'm not saying that takes anything away from Joel Farabee. He's going to be a nice player, and I think that there's going to be people who love him. There's people who already do love him.
Hi, right here, hosting the podcast. Hello.
I do too. I like him as a player. And again, you know what? For me, when I look at players that I like, it says something to me when I sit there, and this goes for every team in the league. When there's a guy who I sit there and I go, you know what? You weren't even drafted yet. And I already like you. And it doesn't matter where you're going to go. I like you. And when I see the potential realized, like, I felt this way about Mikko Rantanen. He goes to Colorado. I sit there and I go, for 3 years, this guy played maybe even longer than that, but for at least 3 years, this guy played on a team that because they had Nathan McKinnon, he was hardly talked about. Yep. But he's great. He's a great player. And now he's on that line, and now he's on one of the best lines in hockey, and he scores just
he's dropping 100-point seasons all over the place.
Kind of, or close to. And you go, this is what I knew about him 5 years ago, 6 years ago when it was his draft year. He's going to be a great player.
Absolutely.
And I liked him then, and I still like him now. I feel that way, and he's not quite the superstar that people thought he was necessarily going to be. I felt this way about Kasperi Kapanen.
Okay.
And I go, I really like this kid. I don't know what it is. I like him, though. And then he does do some things, and you go, pretty talented guy, pretty good player, right? Like, I get these guys in draft years that I go, if I really like, and Joel Farabee was one of them. Before, like, I knew what the target area was. I knew where the Flyers were picking, and I'm like, this is the type of guy they've been waiting for.
It was Jay O'Brien also in that realm?
No, Jay O'Brien, I didn't even have a clue who that was.
Just checking. All right.
Actually, do you know who I would have wanted the Flyers to take with that second pick that year?
Who's out?
I wanted them to take Keandre Miller.
Oh, that would have been a good pick. I really like.
And
I like
he has started
Miller.
to make that jump. He's there. He can be there. You know.
All right.
I can't speak to the other. I can't speak to the other guys who get drafted over 3 times over. Although I hated when they passed on DeBrincat twice.
Yeah, everybody did.
Well, not the first time. The first time was different. Like he was slipping. Then they traded up and they traded up that year. And I thought for sure and certain in that second round they traded up. And I'm like, it's DeBrincat. It's got to be. How do you get? How else do you look at it and go, this guy keeps falling, and he scored whatever number of goals he did.
All right, time for me to put my foot down. We're closing in on 2 hours. We have one more story to talk about here. Really, honestly, probably the best story we've had out of the Philadelphia Flyers all season long. Oscar Lindblom wins the 2021 Bill Masterson Trophy. What is the definition? Perseverance and excellence?
Perseverance, excellent, like dedication to the game. But perseverance, courage, that type of stuff, like all those words fly around. And
exemplifies the qualities of perseverance, sportsmanship, and dedication to hockey.
I thought it was really nice because in a lot of cases they've had previous winners or things like that do it. And Bobby Ryan, who won it a year ago, was the one who did the presentation, who literally flat out in the call or on the announcement says to Oscar Lindblom, "I'm surprised this wasn't a year ago."
And we talked about it at the time. It's only because of when they did the voting. I'm convinced.
Well, even whether it is or whether it isn't is beside the point. Also, like I look at that and I go, like that's a classy thing to say for a guy who did overcome something that was pretty well known in its own right.
Very public.
The
Bobby Ryan situation was ugly for a minute.
But he overcomes it, and
Cherry Hill native.
Yeah, but we look at that and we go, okay, he overcomes that thing, and we see what it is. And there was it was funny because when we talked about this a year ago, when he didn't win, and you go, how do you argue that one guy is more or less deserving for going through something that you have to persevere through, like a hardship of any kind? You know what I mean? Like you don't argue it. Like everybody's like, I know.
It feels weird voting for this award because like
there's
you're just comparing pain.
There isn't an undeserving winner.
Right.
Of this award, but that's why it's nice to hear a player who did win it, who you can't argue why he won it. Felt like we should have been doing this last year. Telling a guy who had then come back already, we should have just been like, this should have been you last year.
Yeah, and I think we all kind of felt
really
that at the time.
classy and it's really nice and it's just I think it's just. Look, we said this a year ago, this was going to happen, so we're not surprised. Yeah,
this is one of those awards we kind of had a feeling he might win it last year, but again, because of the timing, they voted after the diagnosis, but before he came back, so I think that's kind of why Bobby Ryan took it last year, but we all knew the second that they announced he didn't win it, we all put it in pen for 2021.
I think we also knew it too. Not only that, but when he came back, he was ready to go at the start of the season, and then in his first 2 games, scored 2 goals
and looked solid. Yeah,
I'm not like they weren't pretty goals by any stretch. One was an empty netter, one went off his head. But
they don't ask how; they ask how many.
Well, right, but also in the sense like it was so storybook that it's like, all right, when you came back the first time, it's the playoffs. They were probably going to ease you in a little bit. You weren't going to especially when that double overtime rolls around.
Imagine if he scored the winner. I know,
but they probably were limiting the amount of time played because of the fact that you're like, he just came back from all of this. We kind of don't.
You can't expect him to have a gas tank,
right? So when he does come back, and in the first game of the season, where you actually not only that, but you also kind of get a chance to legitimately honor him now for coming back, and then he scores, it's storybook.
It's so good.
So you kind of knew right then and there. It's like, well, he's made it all the way back. Not only has he played, now he's scored. So he's made it all the way back.
We'll wrap it up here. We're done. Yeah, this list is just and everybody else is just an also ran this year. Sorry.
Who were the other finalists, by the way? I don't even remember who they were. That's how bad it is.
The other finalists. I'm not sure if they knock it down to 3 finalists or if every team just puts their...
No, I think there is 3 finalists because it was like that last year. I can Google it. Not Google it. I got
top 3 vote getters. Lindblom, Minnesota Wild defenseman Matt Dumba, and Sharks forward Patrick Marleau.
Okay, so Patrick Marleau was nominated because of the record, I would assume.
And which is fair, because you know what? When you play the most games in NHL history, that is perseverance and also dedication to hockey.
Sure. And I think Dumba's thing is kind of a combination of his community efforts and being a subject of something that let's face it, it's obviously not the easiest thing to talk about. It's why we still struggle with these situations to begin with. But he stands as a representative of that type of stuff and does it well and shoulders a lot of it to be one of the leaders of that grouping. So
yeah, Matt Dumba's been a very vocal activist, especially over the last year and a half or so, for sure.
So, I mean, like, look, I don't think either of them is going to sit there and argue Oscar Lindblom winning the award either when you think about what he goes. Like, I think collectively, everybody, like, it's different adversities that you work through.
Like we talked about earlier, when you're comparing things like this, there are no losers. There's the guy who won and then a whole bunch of people who also did awesome stuff.
Exactly.
And, like, that's the most important thing. Real quick, just kind of hitting on the rest of the awards. Let's get like a one-sentence breakdown here. Connor McDavid wins the Hart. Nothing to see here, right?
And he won the Hart and the Ted Lindsay, which is basically the same thing. It's one's the MVP to the players and one's the MVP to everybody else.
And one's most outstanding. Yeah.
Right, but the Ted Lindsay's voted on by the players, which is why it's kind of stands out because that's the player saying this is the best player in our game this year.
And
but
Connor McDavid should win this for the next decade. Because he's just going to be the most outstanding player in the NHL for the next decade.
Well, because I don't know. You'll have to tell me if I'm wrong here, but I don't. Is 100 points in 50 games roughly impressive?
Honestly, legitimately, I am surprised that he got 99 of the 100 Hart votes. Or no, he got all 100.
He got all 100. He got unanimous.
I am surprised that Austin Matthews didn't get more because I think scoring 50 goals in a 56-game season is competitive in terms of achievement.
When you know what's interesting too, the three finalists for the Hart specifically were McDavid, Matthews, and McKinnon, and I think it's perfect because nothing against the players who we elevate to this status already, like Ovechkin and Crosby and guys like that, because they're still on that level.
Those might be the three best players in the league right now.
I was going to say, when the other two or beyond kind of, because I'm sure there's others who we could throw into the mix as well, when those guys are gone and done playing, this is the group right here that we're going to...
This is the new generation.
This is the top three that you're going to hear about most often, I would say.
It's weird because Nathan McKinnon is going to be the elder statesman of the group, and it's strange because we feel like he's been around forever, right? We talked about players who feel like they've been around forever. Nathan McKinnon's what, 25? 26?
I don't. He's older than that, isn't he?
He's not much older than that. I'm pretty sure he came over pretty right away. Nathan McKinnon is certainly not old by any stretch.
He's 25. I was trying to figure out when he was, because he was drafted in what, 13, right?
Something like that. Yeah.
So when did he start? And he started playing in 13, 14. So he started playing at 18. He's played for 8 years. It doesn't feel like 8 years, but it has been.
He's been around forever. Yeah.
By the way, we talk a lot about McDavid and Matthews' numbers and their potentials. I think I did that on one of the shows about their potential. Nathan McKinnon's played in 573 games and has 560 points. So he is like right on the point per game marker. He's
going to be the guy. He's kind of going to be your Evgeny Malkin, where he's elite, next level player, but just kind of a little overshadowed.
Well, here's you know why? Because in fairness, as a rookie, he had 63 points in 82 games. Then he had a pretty rough year in 14-15 as a 19-year-old.
That was the year they were like catastrophically bad, was it not?
It was one of them. It wasn't the year after wasn't good either because the year after, one of the years after was when they would have gotten, because wasn't it? It was 17 they got Makar.
Maybe. One of those years, I know they were like catastrophically, historically terrible.
It's got to be this one. So hold on a minute.
Okay.
He played in 64 games, didn't have the best year, he had 38 points. Then he plays 72, had 52 points. So still, nothing's earth-shattering yet. He's kind of giving you Sean Couturier numbers, if you will.
This is much more than one sentence about each award.
I know. The catastrophic year, by the way, he played all two and had 53 points, and he was a minus 14. That's how I know it was the catastrophic year. Because he hasn't come anywhere close to minus 14 since. Then all of a sudden, it's like the gears changed and like everything just shifted. Because then it was 97 points in 74 games, 99 and 82, 93 and 69, and 65 and 48.
Mac hit the gas pedal.
Yeah.
All right.
At 22, everything changed.
Yeah. Speaking of at 22, Adam Fox. I think he's approximately 22.
I thought Makar was going to get it, but I'm not surprised. This is a deserving pick.
I think
he had a great year. He had an outstanding year.
I think Adam Fox was the best defenseman. I'm surprised that he won the award for best defenseman because I know how NHL award voting tends to work.
Yeah, I was a little surprised he won, but I'm not shocked, like crazy shocked because, I'm not crazy.
He was fantastic.
He was great.
He was fantastic. He was probably the best player on that Rangers team. Mika Zibanejad's up there too, but it's one of the two of them for sure. They were the driving force behind that Rangers team.
Yes. Let's see what else here.
Marc-Andre Fleury won the Vezina. We talked about him.
Well, according to Nikita Kucherov, that's not the right choice, but
sure, whatever.
I'm just referencing the press conference.
I know Nikita Kucherov's post game.
All right, listen. I think
you have to take that with a grain of salt.
I think Andrei Vasilevsky is the best goalie in the world. I do understand why Marc-Andre Fleury won the award for the first time ever. By the way.
Yeah, which is insane.
I know that
Vegas might also trade the reigning Vezina winner. Like the reigning Vezina winner might not get protected in the expansion draft. Like there's a lot of strange stuff going on in the Vegas goaltending situation. We talked about McDavid also winning the Ted Lindsay. Kirill Kaprizov won the Calder, and I don't think anybody's surprised by that.
No, it's not at all.
Rod the Bod won Jack Adams.
That was deserving.
We love to say it.
Very deserving.
We love to say it. We talked about his motivational tactics. Alexander Barkov wins the Selke.
Okay, here's my one sentence on this one. We can't. One of the things we've said a lot. Broads and I did this a ton too when we were talking about Florida all the time. Then we say, how often can you say that guy is underrated before it's not true anymore?
Before he's not underrated anymore, right? And we kind of saw that with Sean Couturier last year.
One of my buddies tweeted out after that, rest in peace, the underrated Alexander Barkov,
Is the Selke Trophy award just the he used to be underrated award?
No, because...
Didn't Mark Stone win it a couple years ago?
No, I don't think Mark Stone's ever won
he was a finalist.
He's been a finalist multiple times.
Right. He should win
it. I think eventually he's got one coming to him.
At a certain point, he'll pick up a lifetime achievement.
It's also really hard because whether you're Mark Stone or Alexander Barkov or Sean Couturier over the years or whatever, it's kind of hard not to win the award, but I'm saying like it's hard when realistically there's only two finalists and Patrice Bergeron every year.
Right.
You know what I mean?
It's not fair when one of your podium spots is always
that's not to take away, like Patrice
marker.
Bergeron is probably the best two-way forward we've ever seen, but at the same time, like what I'm laughing about is it's like it's two finalists who you have to try to figure out who it's going to be, and Patrice Bergeron.
And because he gets in whether he really deserves the podium spot or not.
To be completely honest, I thought he was going to win it again. I thought he was going to become 5-time winner.
At a certain point, people are going to figure out that we don't really remember Frank J. Selke very much, and they're just going to rename it the Bergeron Trophy. So either way, that's kind of it for the mostly the on ice. That's the on ice like achievement awards, right? We also have the Lady Bing, which went to Jacob Slavin. Lou Lamoriello won GM of the Year.
An on ice award.
Yeah, I mean he only had one minor.
He didn't have I think he didn't have a stick infraction.
Yeah, he had one minor. And it was a puck over glass penalty.
That's insane as a defenseman.
Insane. Jacob Slavin is absolutely ridiculous.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't that an award that doesn't typically go to defensemen?
Correct.
So that's what makes it a big deal as well, because he's like the first. He's one of the first to have won it in like several years.
You say that, but second on the list in voting was Jared Spurgeon. So.
No, I know. I'm saying
that's just weird.
I'm saying there were people who said he should win it because
the only other defenseman to win the award. Okay, it says it in the article. Bill Quackenbush, 1949.
Really? Okay, there you go.
Red Kelly, 51, 53, 54.
He won it 3 times. Red Kelly's a legend, by the way. So yeah, I'm not surprised there.
And then a Chicago Blackhawk from the early 2010s team.
Brent Seabrook.
No.
It's not? Okay. Oh, hold on a minute. So then it's Duncan Keith, right?
No. Who was their other defenseman? Small guy. offensively minded.
They had a small, offensively minded defenseman who would have won this thing.
Does the name Brian Campbell ring a bell?
Oh wow, yeah.
Yeah.
I almost don't associate Brian Campbell with Chicago near as much. I remember him more as.
But I believe he
Sabre.
won it with Chicago.
Oh, I believe that's true. I'm just saying.
Right.
I think of him more as a Buffalo Sabre over the years.
All right, it is time for us to get out of here. We are well over 2 hours. Kevin claimed that we didn't have much to talk about.
No, we spent an hour on the Tampa Bay Lightning too.
I know.
And the Montreal Canadiens. So all
right. Well, we will be back in 2 weeks, and like Kevin alluded to earlier in the show, we might be back the week after that. We might not take our normal 2-week break at that point. But either way, that's going to do it for today. And like I said, we'll be back in a couple of weeks. In the meantime, make sure you follow the show on Twitter at YWT Podcast. Follow Kevin at Kevin_Durso. You can find the show everywhere. There's nothing on the whiteboard, so I don't know where, but you can find it everywhere. Facebook, Instagram, Podbean, sportstalkphilly.com.
It's right here. Follow it here.
There you go. It's at the bottom of the screen. It's been going through the whole show. You've seen it. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at YWT Podcast over there. And
I say that's why I don't write anything on the whiteboard anymore. I don't have to.
That's fair. Well, until next time, between now and our next show, the Philadelphia Flyers will lose a player, and we will figure out who that is.
And who knows what else? There could be a lot.
Who knows what else?
The next 3 weeks are going to be very interesting, I think.
Yep, and we'll be back to talk about it in 2 weeks. We'll see you.